7 years of building a Mafia empire, shattered in one sentence on our anniversary. Victor Hale, the city's most feared underworld boss, sat across from me at our candlelit dinner and coldly demanded a divorce. He traded me in for a 26-year-old bartender who didn't even know his real business. He thought handing me a $5 million settlement would make me disappear quietly. But he forgot one crucial detail. I was the strategist in the shadows, holding his world together. And when a mafia boss begs for a second chance after his new toy breaks, my answer is going to destroy him. Let's hit pause right here and look at Victor Hale and Elena. For 7 long years, this woman lived in the ultimate delusion, confusing proximity with an actual partnership. She helped this guy build a massive empire from the dirt up, honestly, believing a fancy anniversary dinner would finally prove she mattered. Instead, he cuts her off at the knees with one freezing sentence. "I want a divorce, and I've already found somebody else." They always underestimate what happens when you throw a loyal person away. You and I are going to unpack this entire disaster together today. Because the lesson here is simple. You can never buy love from a man who only worships power, and trying will only destroy you. Picture this. We start in their massive penthouse, which is really just a gorgeous cage built on dirty money. Elena is running around doing this desperate nesting thing, trying to fake some sort of stability. She's lining up golden candles on cold marble and setting out wedding china they've barely ever used. The expensive food from his favorite place is just sitting there getting cold under silver domes. Then we see her staring into the glass, looking at her midnight blue dress. It's a stunning piece. But honestly, she isn't getting ready for romance. She's putting on a uniform, trying to win back a predator who stopped looking at her a long time ago. Sometimes the hardest truth to swallow is that no amount of perfection can fix a broken bond. Look closely at her hair here. She leaves it down, a tiny rebellion against Victor and his obsessive need for her to wear it pulled back tight. 7 years in this psychological prison feels like an absolute lifetime. Her mind keeps drifting back when they went in a filthy Detroit apartment that smelled like rust. Back then, he'd come home at 3 a.m. with bloody hands, and she mistook his desperate need for her as real love. Now they're trapped 40 floors up, drowning in money, but completely alone. Stick with me, because this is where it gets real. The lesson here is brutal but simple. Bleeding together doesn't make a healthy relationship. It just chains the victim to the person holding the knife. Here's the thing about control. Starving someone emotionally is the best way to break them. Elena can't even remember the last time Victor looked her in the eye like she was a human being. By 8:15, him not showing up is just business as usual. Running a criminal empire takes a toll, and leaving her waiting is his default setting. She pours an incredibly expensive wine that he hoards but never drinks, and just sits on that couch. She used to be his equal, right there in the dirt during all the danger that made her need him in the first place. Now, he just feeds her scraps of information. It's tragic, really. When you let someone else dictate your worth, you'll always end up waiting in the dark for a light that never turns on. Then the digital leash vibrates. A text pops up saying, "On my way, 20 minutes." Her first instinct is to send a heart, but watch what she does. She deletes it and sends a plain thumbs up instead. That right there is self-censorship, a pure survival tactic, so she doesn't annoy him with too much affection. 40 minutes pass, and she just sits there frozen. When the private elevator finally chimes, she forces this incredibly painful fake smile. Victor walks in wearing a sharp charcoal suit, and you have to admit, The guy knows how to use his presence as a weapon. He wears his dark empire like a tailored coat, completely dead to human feeling. The truth is, walking on eggshells for someone else only guarantees you'll leave bleeding. Even at 42, Victor looks sharp and dangerous. His cold grey eyes have zero warmth left in them. Those are the eyes of a guy who can silence a whole room just by standing there. When he finally bothers to look at her, Elena gives him this quiet, hesitant hello and wishes him a happy anniversary. Now pay close attention to this next second. A tiny crack of emotion hits his face before his walls slam back down. She tells him, "I made dinner, your favorite." But Victor completely walks past her to pour a massive glass of scotch. He looks at her with the absolute dead stare of a stranger. "You didn't have to do all this," he says. "It's a tough pill to swallow. But sometimes the person you take a bullet for is the one pulling the trigger." His stare right now is purely clinical. "Sit down," he tells her, and you can literally feel the ground drop out from under her. She tries to bring up the cold food, clinging to this picture-perfect dinner as a shield, but he shuts it down. "Sit down," he repeats. She sits on the very edge of the couch, folding her hands like a kid in the principal's office. It's heartbreaking to watch her shrink like this. Victor stays over by the bar, letting the silence knowledge stretch out to make her sweat. "I've been thinking about us," he says. "About where we've been. 7 years is a long time." She nods, desperate for him to agree. The takeaway here is never shrink yourself to fit into a space someone else is already trying to leave. His face is locked up like a stone wall, which is exactly what guys like this do right before they throw you in the trash. "Victor, what are you saying?" she begs him. He puts his glass down with this agonizingly slow click. "I want a divorce." Boom. Just like that, her entire reality shatters. The room looks the same, but her whole world just collapsed. She can't even breathe as she whispers, "What?" Victor just delivers the final blow in this flat, completely dead voice. "I've thought about this for a while," he says. "We're not happy. You know that." He's cutting up their marriage like he's doing paperwork. Here's a hard truth you and I need to remember. Closure is a myth, and expecting empathy from a brick wall will only break your own hands. You can see the sheer panic hit her bloodstream. "I don't understand, Victor. Where is this coming from?" She stamps out. He just looks at his drink like it's the most interesting thing in the room. It's coming from the truth," he says. He totally brushes off how they built everything together, just saying, "People change." She's begging now, her voice cracking, saying they can work on it and figure it out. And that's when he drops the absolute nuke. "There's someone else." The room practically spins. "You're having an affair," she whispers. "I wouldn't call it that." He shoots back like he's just moving on. Isn't the lesson is clear? The moments some renames their betrayal as growth, they're already gone forever. The way he lays out the timeline is designed to cause maximum pain. "I met her 4 months ago," he admits. "She's different, younger. She doesn't carry all this history." Elena is pressing her shaking hands into her legs, just trying to keep from falling apart. Let's look at his face when she calls out his cruel timing. There's a tiny flash of guilt. "The date wasn't intentional," he says, "but I want out." Then he pulls the ultimate manipulative move, demanding she admit she wants the exact same thing. "Don't tell me what I want," she snaps. And finally, the anger punches through her pain. "Never let us, the person who had convinced you that you asked for it. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is let the anger remind you that you're alive." Her fight or flight kicks in and she chooses fight. "Don't you dare stand and tell me what I want," she warns him. You see his jaw clench right there. He hates that she's actually pushing back. "I'm trying to do this cleanly," he says. She lets out this laugh that sounds half crazy. "Cleanly? You think there's a clean way to do this after everything?" Then he tries to blame her depression. "What everything?" he asks. "The last 2 years where you walk around like a ghost?" She stands up, legs shaking, refusing to take the blame for his sins. "Don't make this my fault." But he stays ice cold. "I'm just stating facts. It's a bitter lesson, but true. The person holding the knife will always try to convince you that you ran into the blade." Watch his feet as she steps toward him. He actually takes a tiny step back. Underneath all that power, he's a coward. She lays it all out for him. "I was there when you had nothing. I helped you build everything. I stood beside you through the bloodshed, and now that he's sitting pretty, he's tossing her out." "Make it make sense," she demands. But his face just shifts into this disgusting mask of fake pity. "You've been unhappy for years, Elena," he says. He takes the fact that he broke her and uses her sadness as his excuse to leave. It's maddening to watch. If there's one thing to learn here, it's this. When you build a kingdom for someone who doesn't respect you, don't be surprised when they lock you outside the castle gates. All those years of swallowed pain just explode. "You checked out a long time ago because you pushed me out," she screams at him. She didn't just fade away, he slowly locked her out of her own life. "I used to know every plan, every risk. I was your partner, and then one day I wasn't." Victor drops his voice to absolute freezing. "Things got complicated," he says. "The stakes are higher." He's basically telling her he needs someone who can handle the big leagues. "You think I can't operate at that level?" she asks. He's looking at the woman who poured the concrete for his pyre and telling her she's too weak to live in it. It's a harsh reality. Loyalty means absolutely nothing to someone who only values what you can do for them tomorrow. Let's open this final file together and see what's really happening. We're watching Kingpin Vittorio, a textbook narcissist, spinning his own betrayal to make it look like her fault. He looks right at Luca and tells her she chose to step back, framing her as the architect of her own ruin. Luca is frozen in that classic trauma response. She wants to scream and tear the room apart, but she just stands there shaking. She stares at the man she loved for 7 years, asking when she stopped being enough. Vittorio just ducks the question, completely avoiding any real guilt. Her voice shatters as she is dark and woman.
Never see Phoenix, he's sexy, he's sexy, he's shy.
Let's hit pause right here. Guys, look at Vittorio's face. Notice how he spins this whole breakup as his grand, calculated master plan. He just has to be the one holding the remote control to her life. And Luca? Oh, she is completely bleeding out right now. But she fires back, asking if his shiny new girl has any idea she's dating a monster. She leans her hand against that freezing glass, staring down at the massive criminal empire she literally helped him build. That is the bitter part. She spent years laying the bricks of her own prison. She spits out a threat, reminding him she holds enough classified data to lock him in a maximum security box for multiple lifetimes. Behind her, you can see the exact second Vittorio shifts from lover to apex predator. Vittorio drops his voice into that dead, quiet tone, the one that usually means somebody is about to disappear forever. He asks if she is making a threat. Luca just stares him dead in the eye and tells him it is a basic fact. Right here, across this ridiculously expensive dining table, you can see the exact moment her heart finally snaps. She realizes you cannot negotiate with a guy who thinks he is a god. Vittorio clinically pivots to lawyers and financial settlements and the prenuptial agreement. Like he is just shutting down a failing tax front. Luca lets out this broken, jagged laugh. It sounds crazy, right? But honestly, true survival only kicks in the exact second you realize the person you love was never actually real. Now, Vittorio looks away for a second. Yeah, might think he feels guilty, but no, he is just annoyed that he has to watch her cry. He tells her she is a strong woman, which is just a pathetic little lie he uses to make himself feel better about destroying her. As he grabs his coat and heads for the private elevator, Luca completely freezes up. Her whole body goes numb. Just as the doors slide open, she strips away all her pride and begs him to tell her if he ever actually loved her. His answers? He says he thought he did. Boom. That is a psychological bullet right to the chest. The steel doors slide shut, leaving her totally alone in this massive, gorgeous cell. It was never their shared home. It was only ever his cage. Stick with me here, because this is where the movie gets brutally real. Luca stands alone, staring at a ridiculous anniversary dinner setup. Instead of falling to the floor and sobbing like a normal person, her brain just hits an emergency shutdown. She calmly picks up a heavy crystal wine glass and whips it straight at the reinforced security window. It shatters into 1,000 pieces, the dark red wine splashing across the bright white carpet like a crime scene. Most people would be screaming, but Lucas just looks completely emptied. She has been totally hollowed out by a guy who drains people for sport. And the worst part? The stupid, romantic candles just keep burning, completely ignoring the absolute tragedy that just went down. She just stands there, totally frozen in place for what feels like hours. When she finally moves, it is like watching a broken robot. She starts doing the dishes. She blows out the candles. She hangs up his coat. It is tragic, honestly. She is trying to find one tiny thing she can control while her entire universe burns to the ground. Then she walks into the master bedroom and starts packing. She completely ignores all the diamonds, the designer bags, the priceless art. She finally sees them for what they really are, just incredibly expensive dog collars. She is finally cutting the cord. Suddenly, her phone lights up the dark room. It is a text message. The safe house on 7th Street is ready, and the keys are waiting for her. That text, comes from Marcus. He is Vittorio's head of security, and ironically, he is the only guy in this entire mafia who actually treats Luca like a human being instead of a shiny trophy. She confirms the plan and gets ready to run before midnight. Standing at the door, she takes one last look at the penthouse. She finally sees the truth. It is a maximum security prison dressed up as a billionaire's paradise. She leaves the bloody-looking wine stain on the rug. Let Vittorio and his new girl, Irina, scrub that out. When Luca finally unlocks the door to a tiny, basic studio apartment on 7th Street, it hits her. It is totally silent. No maids, no guards, no ghosts. It is terrifying, but for the first time, it is hers. Let's hit pause again and look at this contrast. Luca drops her bags on a cheap, narrow mattress, staring out at a boring brick wall. Now that she is out of the shark tank, her brain finally lets her feel it. The dam completely bursts. She's not just crying over a bad breakup. She's mourning the fact that she gave 7 years of absolute, blinding loyalty to a guy who does not even possess a heart. Her throat is burning. Her eyes are completely swollen. And the sick joke of it all? While she is physically breaking down, Vittorio is probably already pouring champagne for Irina across town. He just replaces the batteries and moves on. At 34 years old, Luca has to rebuild her entire soul from scratch. You and I have probably both felt this next part, and it is the absolute worst. Luca finally passes out, giving her body a tiny break. But then morning comes, and she gets hit with that brutal waking amnesia. For 3 beautiful seconds, she forgets it all happened. Then the memory scene slams into her like a freight train, playing Vittorio S. Cold, Dead Eyes on an endless loop. She forces herself out of bed and looks in the bathroom mirror. The reality is incredibly hard to look at. Her face is swollen, her skin is totally wrecked, and she could barely straight. This is not some AIDS glamorous. We're looking at the raw, ugly, unfiltered aftermath of a girl who just survived a psychological bombing. She steps into a freezing cold shower, scrubbing herself so hard like she can somehow wash a decade of manipulation down the drain. Then, in this beautiful little act of rebellion, she puts on baggy blue jeans and a massive, chunky sweater. Vittorio absolutely hated clothes like that. Stepping out onto 7th Street, she is in a whole new world. There are no bulletproof cars or bodyguards here, just noisy laundromats, cheap diners, and regular people trying to survive. She starts walking with no destination in mind, just trying to keep her panic attacks at bay. Eventually, her feet stop in front of a beat-up independent coffee shop. It is messy, it is loud, and it is the exact opposite of everything her ex stood for. By walking into this dusty little cafe, she is literally rewriting her own brain. She buys a simple black coffee, finds a quiet corner facing the door, and opens a book. Remember, Vittorio used to forbid her from reading, because heaven forbid she focused on anything other than his massive ego. But just as she gets a few pages in, the plot throws us a curveball. A guy in his late 30s walks up. He looks incredibly nervous, holding his hands up like he comes in peace, and politely asks if the chair across from her is taken. He is not scanning her like a piece of meat. He is not sizing up her bank account. Luca hesitates, takes a breath, and nods. It is her first real, normal conversation in almost 10 years. The guy says his name is Adrian. Luca tells him her name, fully expecting the conversation to die right there. But Adrian actually pays attention. He looks at her nervous body language and casually guesses that she just moved to the neighborhood. He talks about his own rough first week in the city and trying to make her feel less alone. Luca is still sitting there with her defensive shields cranked up to maximum, totally expecting him to demand something from her. But then Adrian makes a really terrible joke about how bad the espresso tastes, and he awkwardly apologizes for bothering her. Right then, against all odds, the corners of Luca's mouth twitch. She actually smiles, a real honest smile. The ice is finally cracking. For the next 30 minutes, we get to watch two people just be normal. Adrian talks about his life as a freelance photographer, how he moved from Portland, and complains about his bad knee. And the most beautiful part about all of this, he never pushes her. He does not treat Luca like a broken toy he needs to fix. And he definitely does not look at her like a prize he wants to own. He just treats her like a person. When his phone alarms, he doesn't try to lock her into anything. He just stands up, gives a friendly wave, and says they should grab coffee again sometime. No aggressive demands. No mind games to trap her. Just an open door that she can walk through whenever she is finally ready. Let's pause one last time to appreciate this exact moment. That tight, crushing pain in Luca's chest. It is not the agony of missing her toxic ex anymore. It is actually the terrifying, beautiful feeling of hope. She watches Adrian walk away, realizing her shoulders have finally dropped. But then, right on cue, her phone buzzes. It is a terrifying message from Vittorio S. lawyers, demanding she show up to a meeting so they can dictate the rules of her new life. You and I both know how easily Sinner can get dragged right back into the dark. But watch her face. Luca reads the threat, takes a dips and the stones down on the table. Kingpin has lost his power. She is finally learning how to breathe. Look at this scene. 3 days later, Elena steps into a soulless down glass box that practically reeks of your corporate extortion. She is wearing all black, not to mourn her dead marriage, but as battle armor. Stick with me here, because this is the exact moment she shifts from victim to survivor. The lawyer, Richard Moss, flashes a smile so fake it actually hurts. "Mrs. Hale," he says, sliding a massive stack of papers across the table. "Let us make this simple." Elena completely ignores the documents. "Where is Victor?" she demands. Turns out, her husband outsourced the execution of their life together. Here is a bitter truth to swallow. The people who break you almost never have the guts to look you in the eye when they pull the trigger. Let us hit pause for a second and look at the absolute robbery happening right in front of us. Moss sits there with that predatory shark grin, laying out the terms of a rigged prenuptial agreement. He offers her $2 million and a joint account holding $300,000. Sure, that sounds like a jackpot to a normal person, but against Victor's massive empire, it is a calculated slap in the face. The penthouse, the core assets, the entire syndicate she built with her own sweat. Victor keeps every single dime. When she asks about the companies she ran, the legal trap simply snaps shut on her. This brings us to a harsh but necessary lesson. Never build your beautiful kingdom on real estate owned by a tyrant, because you will leave with absolutely nothing. Every single shipping lane and real estate deal is locked tight on shell counter companies Victor owns completely. Moss just stares at her with dead eyes and explains she does not exist on paper. Zero official position. Victor used to tell her this was to keep her safe from the law, right? Beautifully twisted lie. It was just a classic trap to keep her entirely dependent on him. You can practically see her chest cave in as she realizes she has been erased. 7 years of calming his violent rages and running his empire in the dark. And she does not have a single financial footprint to show for it. She built the monster, and now the monster is locking her out. Remember this lesson for your own life. Invisible loyalty will only ever buy you an invisible reward. The lawyer actually has the nerve to call this pathetic generous. To Alina, that word feels like swallowing crushed glass. She gets exactly 48 hours to review the paperwork, which is just a fake illusion of choice. The game was rigged before she sat down. Standing up, she coldly tells him to use her maiden name, Volov. You can tell the word strange on her tongue. After 7 long years of being Victor's property, she walks out of that building and wanders for 12 blocks like a ghost. That cold, temporary apartment on 7th Street is a roof, but it's definitely not a home. Here is the tragic irony of human nature. Breaking out of a cage does not mean you automatically know how to survive the open sky. True freedom can be absolutely terrifying. She is floating in this miserable middle ground. Now the old Elena is dead, and the new one has not taken a breath yet. Her phone suddenly shatters the quiet. It is Marcus, a guy from Victor's crew. He asks how she all logging up, and she dryly spits out the $2 million number. That is the literal price tag on 7 years of devotion. She stares out the window, watching pigeons fight over the trash, feeling just as discarded. Then she asks the question that hurts the most. She asks about the new girl, Irina. Marcus hesitates, admitting he knew about the affair for at least 5 months. This is the part that really makes your stomach drop. Betrayal is never a solo act. Remember this painful truth. Silence from your closest friends is just a slower, much crueler form of treason. You and I have seen this tragic movie play out before. Elena should be screaming at Marcus for his silence, but she is simply too drained to find her anger. She just asks for the stats on her replacement. Irina is 26 years old, pouring drinks at one of Victor's clubs. She is young, obedient, and dazzled by the cash. Marcus admits the poor girl has absolutely no clue that Victor is a monster. She just thinks he is a really intense businessman. Victor is selling her the exact same fairy tale. Elena shuts her eyes, remembering when she was 27 and falling for the exact same trap. She actually thought she was tough enough to handle his darkness. Here is the chilling takeaway for all of us. We constantly mistake our own youthful arrogance for actual bulletproof armor. Marcus risks his own neck just to make this call. Victor ordered a total blackout, but Marcus owes Elena because she secretly paid his sister's hospital's bills years ago. He tells her Victor is making a massive mistake, but Marcus is simply too terrified to intervene. He cares way more about his own safety than doing the right thing. He mutters that she deserves better, which is the most useless thing you can say to a drowning person. Elena just hangs up and sits in the fading twilight. She watches the normal people down on the street, completely clueless about her dark, violent world. The lesson here hits incredibly hard. All that dangerous power and dirty money that officially costs you the ultimate privilege of ever having a boring, peaceful life.
The jealousy she feels towards El every day actually hurts her chest. Lost. She is right outside the coffee shop where she first met the photographer.
Adrian, it is 6:30 in the evening. Adrian is strictly a morning guy, so the chances of him being there are basically zero. She pushes the door open anyway. The vibe of the place is completely different now. Low lights, soft jazz, and a crowd of night owls who have no idea her universe has just collapsed. She grabs a tea and hides by the window, not even knowing why she came inside. But here is a basic truth about humans' survival. When your mind is entirely ripped apart and lost in the dark, your body will always instinctively crawl back to the very last place it ever felt safe. She is desperately looking for a safe harbor. Out of nowhere, a familiar voice cuts through the music. Somebody says her name. It is Adrian. He is standing there in his beaten-up leather jacket, camera slung over his shoulder. He politely asks if he can sit. As he slides into the chair, her paranoid brain starts scanning him. She notices things she totally missed before. A tiny scar above his left eye, a little gray his temples, rough calloused hands that look like they actually work for a living. She asks how his day was. He casually jokes about taking boring corporate headshots for 75 miserable executives. Pay attention here, because this is the real lesson. True intimacy only begins when we finally stop running and start noticing the deeply ordinary, mundane details of another human being. Then he asks what she does for a living. It is the one question she is terrified to answer. She mumbles vague nonsense about being in a career transition. Adrian just nods and lets it go. He does not interrogate her. Victor would have grilled her until she broke. Adrian simply reads her tense body language, and all his jokes she is hiding out in witness protection. It is a terrifyingly accurate joke, and against all odds, a genuine laugh actually escapes her chest. It is the first time she's breathed freely in days. Instead of digging deeper, he changes the subject, pitching a trip to an art museum to look at photos of broken cities. The lesson is truly beautiful. Sometimes the absolute best medicine for a shattered soul is just a simple, undemanding distraction from the pain. Adrian talks about a museum exhibit focusing on abandoned, forgotten places. He tells her there is a raw, honest beauty in things falling apart. To prove it, he pulls up a photo on his phone. It is a destroyed warehouse with cracked concrete, but the sunlight makes the absolute wreckage look almost. He gently tells her that boring things are always the most interesting. Elena stares at the picture, but her mental walls slam right back up. That she immediately suspects he is running a manipulative game because she cannot comprehend of a man simply being kind for no reason. He casually laughs it off with a self-deprecating joke. Here is the tragic lessons of survival. A mind that has been trained by ruthless predators will always instinctively search for the hidden teeth behind a friendly smile. Let us look closer at this conversation. Elena cynically tells him that nobody does things out of pure goodness. Adrian fires back, completely deadpan, that she has simply been hanging around toxic people for way too long. They end up talking for 2 solid hours. They argue over bad movies, books, and places they want to escape to. You can see her brain rewiring itself. Adrian completely opens up, volunteering his own baggage. He talks about growing up in rural Oregon, his parents hating his photography career, and a painfully broken engagement from 5 years ago. He is handing her his own flaws on a silver platter just to make her feel safe. We learn a vital truth right here. Pure, honest vulnerability is the absolute only antidote to a lifetime of wearing heavy defensive armor. Adrian gets brutally honest about why his engagement crashed. His ex wanted the white picket fence and a predictable suburban life. Adrian needed the chaos of chasing art. As he tells Elena, "You simply cannot negotiate when your souls point in opposite directions." Elena nods, feeling that truth in her bones. But when Adrian casually asks if she has ever been married, she physically flinches. It hits her like a sniper bullet. Adrian instantly reads her panic and tries to take the question back. But Elena stops him. She forces herself to say the words out loud. She tells him she is getting a divorce, and the legal papers are just a funeral for a marriage that died years ago. The lesson is brutal, but deeply necessary. Naming your trauma out loud is the absolute first step in finally disarming it. Hit pause for a second, guys. Look at Elena sitting there, tracing the rim of her coffee cup like it's the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. 7 years. That is how long she spent in the meat grinder with the victor. And the real tragedy? She is not crying over losing a mobster husband. The bitterest part is that she's drowning in shame, because she actually then convinced herself that it was just a normal, the toxicity, she just a normal rough patch. She just sat there and took it. Adrian leans in and flips the script on. He tells her she wasn't weak, she was bleeding out to save a ghost of a marriage, while that megalomaniac just tossed her in the trash. Here is the lesson we all need to swallow. Do not ever confuse your ability to endure absolute cruelty with a failure of your own moral character.
Watch her face crumble right here. That is the psychological vault blowing wide open. The absolute gut punch of Stockholm Syndrome is realizing you do not even exist without the guy holding the leash.
At 34 years old, she looks in the mirror and sees a total stranger. She thinks it is pathetic. But Adrian does not let her wallow. He looks at this shattered, empty canvas and calls it the greatest opportunity of her life. Sure, rebuilding from scratch is agonizing, but it is not impossible. Then he walks out, and you can practically see her dopamine levels hit rock bottom. The silence in that room is deafening, but remember this simple truth, Sith. The terrifying void of the unknown is exactly where we finally get the chance to be reborn. Today, you and I are going to unpack the sickest irony of this whole story. Look at Elena staring out the cafe window, watching Adrian walk away. This guy just gave her a basic ounce of human decency, and to her it feels like an alien invasion. Victor, our resident megalomaniac narcissist, spent years systematically starving her of genuine connection until a simple conversation felt like a miracle. It is a textbook symptom of total isolation. We see this all the time when someone escapes a maximum security relationship. The guy locked her in a mental basement. It brings us to a harsh reality. True, unfiltered attention is the most fundamental currency of respect. Just as she breathes out, her phone vibrates on the table, an unknown number flashing in the dark. Of course, it is Victor. He drops a deadline for Monday, pulling that classic artificial urgency trick just to remind her he still owns the clock. She deletes the text, but the damage is already done. Fast forward to 3 in the morning, and Elena is staring at the ceiling, replaying 7 years of psychological warfare. The bitterest part? It was not the screaming matches. It was the 1,000 microscopic cuts. Victor convinced her that keeping her completely isolated from his mob business was his way of protecting her. He wrapped his fists iron fine velvet and called it love. It is a total mind job. But here is the stark life lesson we pull from the wreckage. Real love does not demand your confinement, and it certainly does not require you to slowly disappear. Let us pause and talk about survival instincts. For years, Elena played the good wife, ignoring the sudden and cancelled plans and the cheap perfume lingering on Victor's expensive suits. Why? Because pulling that thread meant the whole sweater would unravel. But tonight, the sadness burns away, and something entirely new crawls out of the ashes. Pure, unadulterated anger. She is not smashing plates or screaming. It is a cold, calculated hatred directed right at her own reflection. She hates that she shrank her entire soul to fit into a mobster's pocket. She grabs a blank notebook and a pen, and honestly, guys, this is the most beautiful part. Healing does not start with holding hands and offering forgiveness. It starts with a heavy dose of justified, quiet rage. Look closely at what she is writing on those pages. She is mapping out the exact coordinates of her own murder. At 27, she had a pulse, a voice, a life. By 34, she was nothing but a silent hood ornament for a crime boss. She writes down every single version of herself that Victor threw in the incinerator. She is not trying to ruin him, and she definitely does not want him back. She just wants her ghost back in her own blood. By the time the sun comes up, her fingers are literally cramping from bleeding her reality onto paper. It is agonizing to watch, but it proves a brutal life lesson. You cannot recover your shattered identity without staring directly at the ugly, unvarnished truth of exactly how you let it slip away. Hit play on the next morning, because the dynamic completely shifts right here. Elena walks into the cafe, and Adrian is sitting exactly where he said he would be. For someone crawling out of trauma, a promise actually being kept is a massive shock to the system. They sit there drinking scalding coffee, and for the first time in a decade, Elena does not have to scan the room for hidden agendas or manipulative traps. Victor and Eve turn every conversation into a chess match where she always lost. With Adrian, it is just two people existing in the morning light. Her brain is finally doing a hard reset. It is a quiet, beautiful irony, and the lesson is crystal clear. Sometimes, the absolute best therapy is just a cheap cup of coffee with someone who expects absolutely nothing from you. If there is one thing that kills narcissists' grip, it is a boring, predictable routine. Elena builds her fortress. Coffee with Adrian in the morning, battling her demons at night. But then she brings in the heavy artillery, a shark of a lawyer named Patricia Chen. Patricia takes one look at Victor's divorce settlement and laughs. She calls it a predatory insult. She starts grilling Elena, looking for any operational secrets they can use as leverage. At first, Elena hesitates, but then she remembers all those midnight panic attacks where she played the therapist, anchoring a volatile crime boss so he would not implode. Here is a massive life lesson for anyone listening. Your silent, invisible labor has immense value, even if the person benefiting refuses to acknowledge it. Now we hit the classic dilemma of the invisible and accomplice. Victor was a paranoid syndicate operator who never put Elena's name on a single piece of paper. He thought he outsmarted everyone. But Patricia is an absolute savage. She realizes they do not need a paper trail to win, they just need to weaponize his own paranoia. If there is one thing a megalomaniac fears more than death, it is being dragged into the harsh public light. Patricia proposes a total psychological blitzkrieg, threatening to expose every dirty secret Elena ever overheard. The irony is just too perfect. The lesson here is stark but true. A bully might look invincible in the dark, but their greatest weakness is the exposure of the very secrets they use to keep you completely trapped. You and I have to stop and appreciate the terrifying iron tightrope Elena is walking right now. This is the ultimate test of her residual trauma.
Part of her wants to strike a match and burn Victor's entire criminal empire to the ground. But the exhausted, beaten down part just wants to pay the ransom and disappear.
Patricia smells blood in the water. She throws out a $5 million extraction fee, banking entirely on the mobster's desperate need for secrecy. Elena takes a breath, kills her own empathy, and gives the green light to launch the strike. And that brings us to a harsher reality. To survive the devil, you sometimes have to adopt his cold, calculated pragmatism. Afterwards, she ran off to hide in a strange art exhibit full of decaying, abandoned structures. Look at the specific photograph she is staring at in this gallery. It is a completely shattered apartment block with its guts hanging out for the whole world to see. Most people just see concrete rubble and devastation. But Elena is staring into a mirror. Adrian walks up right beside her, and without saying a word, he completely understands the weight of the image. It is the exact visual representation of an orientation of Elena's soul. The fake, perfect mob wife facade has been violently ripped away, leaving all the ugly, jagged truth exposed to the elements. It is brutal, but it is real. The lesson here is inescapable, guys. Sometimes letting the wrecking ball completely destroy your life is the absolute only way to clear the ground for a genuinely strong, unbreakable foundation. Adrian leans in and nails the absolute truth of her situation. He tells her that endings are always a chaotic, bloody mess, stripped of all the polite lies, but there is a harsh, clinical beauty to that kind of honesty. That simple validation is all Elena needs to drop the bomb. She looks at the rubble in the photo and says she finally signed the divorce papers. Now, a normal guy would offer some hollow congratulations or buy her a drink. Adrian just asks her how she is actually holding up in the aftermath. They just stand there in the silence, honoring the absolute wreckage of a 7-year mistake, but is deeply tragic, but teaches us something vital. True progress usually feels exactly like standing in the smoldering ruins of your old life and refusing to blink. Hit pause on this moment because it is make or break. Adrian casually invites her to an actual gallery, opening a loud, chaotic social event in the arts district. You can almost hear Elena's trauma alarms blaring. Her immediate neurological reflex is to sprint back to her apartment and lock the door. Victor trained her to fear the unpredictable, but she looks back at that photograph of the demolished building and something clicks. She realizes that sitting alone in a perfectly safe, quiet room is just a different flavor of captivity. She takes a breath and steps out into the loud, terrifying sensory overload of the real world. The lesson is vital. You absolutely have to force yourself to walk you into the unpredictable light if you ever want to escape the familiar safety of the dark. The chaotic energy of this gallery is the ultimate middle finger to Victor's obsessive need for control. Adrian introduces her to a woman named Kay, an absolute firecracker who reads people for sport. Within 30 seconds, Kay completely dissects Elena's psychological armor and casually diagnoses her recent catastrophic divorce. Under Victor's rule, this kind of exposure would be a death sentence. But Kay just laughs, waves a glass of cheap champagne, and talks about her own ruined marriages like they are battle scars. It normalizes the absolute Elena just walked through. The life lesson here is profoundly human. Discovering that other people have survived the exact same fire is the absolute fastest way to build a reliable bridge back to the breathing world. We are finally hitting the emotional climax of her entire recovery arc. Elena stops dead in front of a massive canvas, a violent explosion of red and black paint that somehow forms the silhouette of a bird tearing into the sky. Adrian asks what she sees. She nails it. It is not just a bird. It is the exact intersection of absolute, screaming rage and total liberation. Adrian nods, quietly dropping a story about the devastating grief of his own failed past. Two broken people standing in a crowded room, using a messy painting to translate the trauma they cannot say out loud. It is a masterpiece of a moment. The fundamental lesson is right there on the canvas. You can never truly experience the absolute freedom of flight without first feeling the white-hot anger of the cage. Today, you and I are going to unpack this story together. Picture this. We're watching Elena finally wake up from a 7-year psychological coma. Her ex-husband Victor was a classic narcissist, the kind of guy who dismantles your mind piece. She spent years bottling up her rage, faking maturity just to survive his control. But tonight, that wall starts to crack. Adrian drops a truth bomb about being angry and free, acting as the perfect mirror for her trauma. They leave the gallery at 10, wandering the arts district. Adrian grounds her, taking her to a late-night bookstore and an open rooftop places Victor could never reach. Here's a simple life lesson. The first, true dining yourself again is just walking away from the places that broke you. Hit pause for a second, guys. Notice how Elena almost drops Victor's name. She catches herself, admitting she only moved to this city for someone else. That's displaced identity in action.
Survivors of extreme manipulation often uproot their entire lives just to feed their captor's ego. But now something clicks. Looking over the city lights,
she feels small, but here's the kicker: she doesn't feel diminished. When Victor made her feel small, it was a trick to make himself look like a giant. Out here, the city simply doesn't care about her trauma, and that indifference is beautifully liberating. It teaches us a real-life lesson. True healing finally starts the moment you realize the world doesn't revolve around your personal pain. The city buzzes in the background as Adrian points out something huge. He notices she doesn't sound sad about the divorce papers. She sounds relieved. Normally, a traumatized person might fake the story of an amicable split, but Elena goes for radical honesty. She lays out exactly how Victor discarded her, replacing her on their anniversary and throwing cash at her to secure her silence. It's a classic monster behavior, treating human attachment like a disposable asset. Admitting how good it feels to stop pretending is a massive breakthrough for her. When Adrian apologizes and she tells him not to, you can feel the raw truth in her words. The life lesson is simple. The very second you stop protecting the false image of the person who teach you, their control completely shatters. Elena finally says the quiet part out loud. Ripping yourself away from a trauma is absolute agony, but staying tied to it will destroy you. Adrian matches her vulnerability by sharing his own past. His former partner used his lack of money against him, weaponizing contempt to mock his art. Contempt is always the ultimate relationship killer. She took his independent choices as a direct insult to her own ego, just a lighter version of Victor's sick games. When Elena asks how he survived it, Adrian gives her a masterclass in moving on. He dropped the fake guilt, created real physical distance, and started living for himself. It teaches us a vital life lesson. You can't heal until you drop the heavy expectations someone else forced onto your shoulders and walk your own path. Adrian nods, agreeing that relief barely covers the feeling of escaping a toxic trap. Standing beside him, Elena feels her mind rewiring itself. This isn't the chaotic panic she once mistook for love with Victor. This is real, quiet empathy. She thanks him for treating her like a person instead of a broken project. When you're manipulated for years, basic respect feels like an absolute miracle. They stay lost in conversation vibration until the place shuts down, talking freely in a way Victor never allowed. Their walk back to 7th Street is slow and completely peaceful. She actually doesn't want the night to end. Here's your life lesson. The greatest proof of your own healing is where finally stop bracing for an attack and start genuinely wanting to connect with another human being again. Let's unpack this moment, shall we? Elena points out her tiny studio apartment, fiercely proud that it's entirely hers. For someone escaping a cage, having your own space is everything. Adrian suggests seeing her again, but he doesn't push. He just gives her hand a gentle squeeze, respecting her boundaries. As Elena walks up the stairs and locks her door, her heart is racing. This is the beautiful part. This isn't the sick panic she used to feel waiting for Victor to explode. This is the thrill of real anticipation. For the first time in 7 years, the ghost of Victor's wife is gone, leaving only the real Elena. The life lesson is profound. True freedom isn't just escaping the bad situation. It's finally remembering exactly who you were before they tried to erase you. Just as she enjoys this new freedom, her phone buzzes. Her lawyer says Victor is offering $5 million. For a control freak like Victor, money is never just cash. It's a heavy leash designed to keep his victim chained to him. Elena doesn't see this as a lottery win. She sees it as the exact price tag for her permanent escape. She orders her lawyer to accept the deal immediately. When he tries to fight for more, Elena shuts it down cold. Dragging out the battle is exactly what Victor wants because it keeps her trapped in his game. By cutting it short, she starves his ego. The simple life lesson here? Peace of mind is your true currency. Sometimes refusing to fight back is the most powerful move you can possibly make to protect your own life. $5 million is far less than she built for him, but chasing fairness is a trap that keeps victims locked in. You know, she sits in a sterile conference room to cut the cord. Naturally, Victor doesn't even show up. By avoiding her, he pretends he's superior and untouched. His lawyer acts like a machine, sliding the contracts over and explaining the 72-hour bank transfer. It's brutally cold. This is the reality of escaping a controlling person. Years of intense psychological trauma are reduced to signing a piece of paper and waiting for a bank alert. The life lesson is crucial. Stop waiting for the villain to feel bad. Real closure almost never sounds like an apology. Most of the time, it just looks like an open exit door. Stick with me, this part is chilling. The paperwork gives Victor a total legal immunity. Reading the fine print, Elena spots the real knife twist. She's signing away her own history. Every brilliant idea she gave his empire is erased.
Predators don't just want you gone. They want to rewrite reality so you never existed. Yet, here she signs that lie without hesitation.
Walking outside, her lawyer gives her one last chance to fight back. Elena looks at the heavy gray sky. She's completely exhausted and simply says no. Going back into the ring with Victor would just trigger that toxic bond all over again. Here's the life lesson. Sometimes you have to let this toxic person completely erase your past, just so you can finally walk away and take total ownership of your future. Her lawyer vanishes into the crowd. Standing alone on the sidewalk, Elena totally dissociates. She feels like a ghost floating outside her body. The chain tying her to Victor is finally gone. She lost the fake for years and has nothing to anchor her. Hollywood tells us she should be cheering, but in reality, when your brain finally drops its high-stress survival mode, it doesn't feel like joy. It feels like a terrifying black hole. Her profound emptiness isn't a sign that she's failing to heal. It brings us to a tough life lesson. True recovery doesn't always begin with fireworks. It usually starts with a scary, hollow silence. That empty space is exactly where your real, authentic self will eventually be rebuilt. That dark silence is broken when Adrian calls. He asks how her appointment went without prying. That quiet respect for boundaries is completely alien to someone who survived Victor. Adrian knew she was finalizing her divorce, but he never interrogated her. When she tells him it's done, he doesn't ask about the money. He just asks how she feels. Elena admits she's totally numb, wandering aimlessly. That numbness is just her exhausted nervous system turning off its threat radar. Adrian offers to sit with her with zero pressure, and she agrees. They meet at the waterfront. Here's a crucial life lesson for anyone starting over. To truly heal, you must consciously build safe, new memories in entirely neutral environments to overwrite the heavy trauma triggers of your past. When Elena arrives, Adrian has coffee and a pastry waiting. He tells her she looks exhausted. If Victor said that, it would be a cruel insult about her looks. From Adrian, it's pure concern for someone running on empty. He sees she's drained and gently pushes her to eat. Trauma survivors often forget basic needs, and she can't remember her last meal. As she eats, the simple taste pulls her mind back into her physical body. They sit watching the harbor in comfortable silence, and her numb walls begin to crack. She admits she thought the legal papers would magically fix her. This brings us to a profound life lesson. A signature can legally remove you from a toxic cage, but only time, patience, and genuinely safe people will ever set your mind free. Let's pause right here and look at the supreme irony of human nature. You and I have both seen this play out a million times. Elena actually expects that dragging a pen across a water paper is going to magically rewire her entire psychology. But she just feels exhausted, like a sadder version of the exact same girl. And Adrian? He drops an absolute truth bomb. He tells her that cutting off a toxic trauma bond does not hand you a shiny new personality. It just gives you an empty, quiet room to finally figure out who you were before the nightmare started. He even points to his own wrecked engagement as proof. No Hollywood magic, you just slow, painful steps in the dark. And for the first time, she really looks at him. Watch how her brain scrambles to make sense of this guy. Adrian is the complete opposite of Victor. There is no flashy charm, no mind games, no arrogant strut. He is just devastatingly steady. Elena is sitting there, totally thrown off, thinking it is absolute madness that 20 minutes after escaping a monster, This random photographer is the safest thing in her world. But Adrian hits the pause button on her panic with a heartbreaking piece of logic. He gently points out that when you spend years surviving a sociopath, a normal, decent guy feels like a freak anomaly. That is the real tragedy here, guys. The most bitter pill is realizing that true safety does not arrive with fireworks. It just sits quietly beside you.
Stick with me on this one, because this is where the psychology gets incredibly dark. We are watching a textbook case of Stockholm Syndrome, only her cage was $1 million penthouse.
Adrian leans back and tells her he expects absolutely nothing, no demands, no pressure. And you can physically see her nervous system crash in real time. The knots in her chest finally let go. She actually thanks him just for letting her be a mess. Think about how thoroughly a megalomaniac narcissist has to break you down for that happen. When you are hardwired to survive constant, suffocating corona, suddenly having a room sore to breathe does not feel like freedom. It feels like stepping off a cliff into the terrifying unknown. Adrian plays this perfectly, casually mentioning that everyone is a disaster, and she is just braver for admitting it. They sit there while the sun goes down, trading the kind of boring, normal stories she's been starved for. He complains about an annoying photography client. She talks about finding an apartment with lots of natural light. Notice that detail? It is a total subconscious rejection of the dark hole she just crawled out of. But look at her hands. She keeps stirring a coffee that is already mixed over and over. She says she has nothing tying her down, but it is exactly what terrifies her. Suddenly, having zero rules and total freedom is the ultimate nightmare for someone who forgot how to fly. So she does what any of us would want her to do. She talks about packing up and running to a brand new city. But the brutal reality check hits her. You cannot outrun your own broken mind. She decides to plant her feet right where she wants to choose to, right where she is, and until she remembers what she actually wants out of life. Adrian tells her that is the healthiest thing she could do. They step out of the cafe and just walk by the water. No map, no destination. And right here, guys, is the cinematic turning point. For the first time since she got locked into that abusive cycle, she's just existing. She is walking next to a guy who does not charge an emotional tax for his company. When he asks to show her a place, she says yes, and her heart does not even spike. Now he leads her into this totally uncharted territory, an old, rusted-out textile factory. He rents a photography studio up on the 3rd floor. The second she walks in, her senses get hit with exposed brick, high ceilings, and the sharp bite of processing chemicals. Hit pause and look at the contrast. Victor kept her in a sterile, perfectly curated museum where she was just another object. But Adrian is completely different. His world is absolute, beautiful chaos. Equipment everywhere, raw pictures scattered around. It is messy, but it is harmless. By turning on those lights and letting her step into his creative disaster zone, he is handing her the keys to his brain. No traps, no hidden agendas, just the messy truth of who he is. What kills me here is how effortlessly he admits his own mistake. That kind of vulnerability is completely alien to the narcissistic war zone she just left. She walks around, looking at these pictures of rotting urban landscapes that perfectly match the total ruin inside her own head. But then she spots the portraits. Real people, totally unguarded, completely stripped of the fake smiles her ex-husband used to demand she wear. She tells him they are beautiful. Adrian inflating his ego, Adrian just shrugs, totally grounded, and admits he has no idea why he even brought her up here. That pure, unfiltered honesty is the exact weapon that finally shatters the last of her heavy defensive armor in 2 pieces. Listen closely, because Adrian is about to deliver a masterclass in psychological repair. She keeps saying the divorce did not change her, and he just shakes his head. He pulls out a piece of photographic paper, barely exposed, looking like a ghost. Then he shows her one with sharper lines, and finally, the finished, crystal clear image. He tells her human recovery is the exact same chemical process. Her real identity was never destroyed by the abuse. It was just sitting in the dark bath, waiting for the right moment to finally bleed through to the surface. It is such a devastatingly beautiful way to look at trauma. You do not have to invent a brand new version of yourself. You just have to slowly reveal what survived. We have to take a breath here and really look at what is happening. Elena stares at the photos and quietly asks if she is the one developing now. And Adrian just looks right back and tells her yes. Her soul survived the fire. It just needed a safe room to show its face. In any other movie, this would sound so cheesy, but right here, her cynical walls completely collapse. She admits her darkest, most heartbreaking fear. What if the real girl underneath all that trauma is actually ugly? What if she hates her true self? Adrian smiles and crushes that fear instantly. He tells her nobody is a finished picture. We are all constantly developing. And in that bubble of perfect safety, she suddenly wants to lean in and kiss him. The instinct to pull him in is so violent, strong. But hit pause and watch what her brain does next. This is the ultimate proof she is actually healing. Instead of grabbing onto him like a life raft to escape her own pain, she pulls the brakes. She knows her foundation is way too cracked to handle a real relationship right now. Adrian reads the room perfectly. He steps back, kills the tension, and pivots to basic survival. He says they need food. Next thing you know, they are sitting in a cheap K-Tok joint on plastic chairs. He is ordering in terrible Mandarin. The cooks are laughing at him, and Elena is actually arguing with him over absolute nonsense. It is the glorious sound of a broken girl learning how to play again. When she finally crashes onto her bed that night, it is not the paranoid, hyper-vigilant exhaustion she had with her ex. It is that deep, satisfying tiredness of just being human. Her brain is working overtime, trying to accept that she actually spent a night with someone who wanted nothing from her. But reality always comes back to kick the door. The sun comes up, her phone buzzes, and boom. $5.3 million just dropped into her checking account from her lawyers. Most people would be screaming, popping champagne, riding the ultimate high. But trauma could not care less about how many commas are in your bank app. Staring at that massive number, she does not feel like a winner. She just feels entirely drained. You and I are going to unpack this final twisted joke together. That pile of cash is Victor playing his absolute last card. He is a narcissist, so to him, human souls have a literal price tag. That money is just his sick way of paying her severance for 7 years of emotional hostage-taking. Every instinct in her body is screaming to send a fiery text, to somehow force that monster to feel a single ounce of genuine remorse. But her newly healing brain steps in. She realizes a shark is never going to apologize for biting you. It just does not have the hardware. So instead of fighting a ghost, she texts Adrian to get coffee. She walks into that normal, boring cafe, and just like that, she chooses to plant her roots in the light. Look at Adrian right here. He spots Elena walking in, and he doesn't need a degree to read her face. He knows that $5 million deposit just hit her account, and instead of celebrating, she looks like she's carrying a tombstone. He hands her a coffee, a tiny, warm anchor, and tells her to spill it. This is where it gets incredibly dark. Elena admits she feels completely hollow. 7 years of what she thought was a shared life, and Victor just cashed her out like a fired employee. She is paralyzed, torn between burning the cash and needing it to survive. Holding that hot ceramic cup, the irony fully sets in. The biggest payday of her life is the exact moment she realizes she meant nothing to the man she loved. Sometimes, the clearest truths are the ones that leave you entirely bankrupt inside. Let us pause the movie right here, because you and I have seen this brutal phase of recovery. Elena tells him the cash means nothing. The fatal blow is how Victor erased her identity, discarding her like a broken appliance. Adrian plays the shrink, asking her what exact apology would give her closure. Her answer is devastating. Nothing. There is no magic word that Victor would say to fix her fractured reality. She knows she has to kill her own hope. But Adrian hits her with a sniper shot of a question: are you really free of him? Caught in the glaring headlights of the truth, she finally drops the denial. She confessed that a huge piece of her own mind is sitting inside Victor's pocket. The bitterest lesson here: you can walk out the front door, but your ghost might stay trapped inside for years. Elena admits her soul is still locked inside that luxury penthouse, tied to a fake version of Victor that never actually existed. She's just haunting the place. Adrian doesn't mock her for this. He validates the raw truth, gives her hand a grounding squeeze, and reminds her that rewiring a traumatized brain makes take time. Elena fights back tears, believing she's entirely unworthy of his patience. But Adrian flips the scrum, feeling his patience is his own choice, instinctively killing her guilt. As we watch them resume their walk through the city, the irony is clear. Vic controlled her with chaos, but her friend heals her with steady calm. True freedom from a monster isn't a single explosive movie climax. It's built quietly, in the ordinary spaces where silence finally feels safe. Let us take a closer look at this next scene down by the waterfront. They watch cargo ships moving with purpose, but Elena locks onto one tiny sailboat cutting through the grey water. It hits her like a physical blow. She tells Adrian she used to sail, right until Victor made her sell the boat because he claimed to get seasick. Guys, hit pause for a second. We all know the real truth here. A control freak like Victor can't handle the ocean because he can't dictate what the water does. He manipulated her into giving up her true escape route, spinning it as practical. And the tragic part? She willingly gave up her freedom, blinded by the trauma bond, believing she was just being a good partner. The irony is terrifying. You don't always lose your independence in a violent fight. Sometimes, you hand it right over with a smile.
Adrian, playing the ultimate logical anchor here, drops a massive truth bomb. He reminds her she has $5 million in the bank. She could literally buy a new boat today. Elena instantly laughs.
But it's that bitter, defensive laugh of a captive. After years of mental prison, making her own choices feels like a sick joke. She argues she forgot how to sail, terrified she'd just drown out there. But Adrian refuses to accept that learned helplessness. He looks right at her and says she can simply relearn. Right there, you see the light flicker in her eyes. For the first time in nearly 10 years, she actually pictures a life where Victor doesn't exist. Reclaiming her passion is absolutely terrifying, but also perfect. True recovery isn't a massive leap. It's a terrifying microscopic step toward taking your own life back. But the universe has an incredibly sick sense of humor. Right by a coffee cart, Elena's radar locks onto a target across the street. Her entire body shuts down. It's Victor. And of course, the monster has already found his next meal, a young woman named Irina. Elena suffers a total system failure, freezing so hard Adrian almost crashes into her. She's paralyzed, watching her abuser walk around like the 7-year nightmare he put her through never happened. Victor looks ridiculously happy. He places his hand flat on the new girl's lower back. To anyone else walking by, it looks like sweet affection. But we know better. That's a calculated, predatory move to establish physical dominance. It's the exact same trap Eleanor fell into, and she's forced to just stand there on the pavement and watch the saw start all over again. Let's break down the absolute mental torture happening on screen right now. The guy across the street isn't the cold, dead-eyed tyrant Elena barely survived. Victor is back in his shiny, perfect grooming phase. Adrian is talking, but his voice is white noise, as Elena watches Victor open a cab door for Irina with the exact same fake charm he used to ruin her life. When Adrian snaps her out of it, Elena drops a brutal confession. Seeing him still hurts. This is the absolute cruelest joke of the trauma bond. She hates him, but she's completely gutted by the injustice. How is it fair that the man who destroyed her gets to smile in the sun while she's left sweeping up the shattered pieces of her mind? She doesn't want to go back to the cage. She's simply grieving the sickening reality that the villain is the one who gets to walk away happy. You know how most people try to fix a friend's pain with cheap promises about that? He refuses to feed her a lie, secretly being miserable. Instead, he stands there, you totally grounded and solid. It's the exact opposite of the emotional war zone Victor always forced her to live in. Adrian quietly pulls her out of the blast radius and then steers her into a modern art museum. Elena collapses onto a bench in front of a painting of abstract chaos. It perfectly mirrors the wreckage inside her head. She's choking on repressed rage. When Adrian asks her to name the feeling, she nails it. She's furious that the parasite found a new host, sickened by her own lingering attachment, and absolutely enraged that the universe lets monsters thrive while the surviving victims have to beg for scraps of sanity. Pressing her hands hard against her eyes, Elena confesses something truly heartbreaking. She admits she wants Victor to suffer. She wants to force him to feel the exact weight of the psychological torture he inflicted on her. And the saddest part, she calls herself pathetic for wanting revenge. But Adrian steps in with the perfect translation of clinical therapy. He validates that dark rage, telling her that wanting to see your abuser pay the price isn't a character flaw. It's a normal human reaction to having your soul violated. Desperate, she begs to know when this agonizing withdrawal will finally end. Adrian gives her the only honest truth there is. One day, her exhausted brain will simply rewire itself. The paralyzing fear will slowly fade into complete apathy, or if she's lucky, profound pity for a broken man. Adrian lays down a hard boundary right here, reminding her there's no magic switch to fast forward the healing process. As the silence stretches out, Elena's mind drifts straight to the new girl, Irina Moiset. She's hit with that survivor's panic, the desperate urge to run over and warn the new victim before the trap snaps shut. She points out how completely oblivious Irina looked walking into a psychological slaughterhouse. But Adrian cuts through the panic with a surgical strike. He asks, if someone had warned her 7 years ago, would she have listened? Elena pauses, looking back at her younger self, completely drunk on Victor's early love bombing. The bitter truth drops. She wouldn't have listened to a word. Her logical brain knows the new girl is beyond on saying, but her shattered nervous system is still screaming to enact a rescue. The final of narcissistic abuse is the total deletion of who you are. Elena feels like a ghost who's been completely scrubbed from the record. She's deeply frustrated that signing lay legal papers and getting a massive payout didn't instantly cure the nightmares. She complains it's been weeks, expecting the trauma to just evaporate on schedule.
Adrian starts to swallow treatly.
Healing is never a straight line.
Your brain will swing from feeling totally normal right back into a panic attack without warning.
Realizing she's stuck in her own head, Adrian physically pulls her off the bench. He leads her away from the flat-sat paintings and into a room filled with massive bronze sculptures. He plants her right in front of a violently twisted piece of metal, forcing her body to move to break the vicious mental loop. Stick with me here because this is where Adrian's intervention becomes absolute genius. He points at the jagged metal and asks what she sees. Elena just shrugs and calls it random, violent chaos. But then he tells her to physically walk around it. As she moves her feet to the other side of the room, the messy, twisted steel suddenly lines up into a deliberate, beautiful pattern. Adrian uses this hunk of metal to teach her the ultimate life lesson. He tells her she's looking at Victor from the absolute worst angle possible. She's staring at the illusion of her abuser's shiny new life while standing right in the darkest crater of her own withdrawal. He makes her realize that the image of Victor as an invincible, happy god is nothing but an optical trick, completely generated by her own temporary grief. Change your position and the monster loses all his power. Let us hit pause right here, because you and I have been in this exact spot. Elena is pacing around like a trapped animal, practically begging Adrian for the magic formula to fix her broken brain. She wants the perfect angle to view her trauma so it stops hurting. But Adrian drops a brutal truth. You cannot just stand still in the ashes of your old life. You have to keep moving. Circling the wreckage until you finally realize the monster who broke you was actually just a fragile, pathetic person. Elena sees through his casual photographer act, realizing he is quietly saving her life. And here is the simplest lesson you will ever learn. Sometimes the only way to beat the heavy shadow of your past is to turn your back on it completely and force yourself to go do something entirely new. Adrian asks when she last did something just for pure fun. The blank look on her face is the quiet tragedy of surviving a narcissist. She literally cannot remember. So he drags her to a dusty batting cage. At first, it is tough to watch. Her body is completely locked in survival mode, stiff and terrified. But Adrian does not mock her. He just quietly fixes her stance with total response. And then she connects. Crack. You can see years of caged anger leave her body through the end of that bat. She swings until her arms feel like lead, trading her silent panic for loud, breathless laughter. The lesson here is physical and real. You cannot simply think your way out of a frozen heart. Sometimes, you just need to wet the poison until you remember how it feels to smile. You can see the tension finally melting off her shoulders. A batting cage does not magically cure trauma overnight, but that suffocating weight on her chest has cracked. She turns and thanks Adrian for pulling her out of the dark instead of soaking up the breeze like her toxic ex would have. Adrian just shrugs. He tells her she did the heavy lifting herself. This completely scrambles her conditioned brain. By the time they reach her apartment, the paranoia kicks back in. When you spend years as a pawn, you assume every nice gesture is a trap. She looks him dead in the eye and asks what he actually wants, since she has nothing left to give. The lesson here is a bitter pill. Abuse trains you to be terrorist. Exact people you're harmed. Adrian hits her with kind of quiet honesty that would make a manipulative guy like Victor explode. He tells her straight up that he actually likes her messy, chaotic self way more than the obedient doll she was forced to be. He sees a fire in her that she cannot even feel yet, and he just wants a front row for us, you see, to watch it burn bush. And this kind of pure, no strings attached support completely short the circuits her brain. It feels terrifyingly intimate. Seeing her panic, Adrian quickly makes a joke at his own expense, bringing up an ex who thought he had zero drive. Instantly, Elena jumps to defense. Her mind is finally clear enough to see his true heart. The lesson is beautiful. Real ambition is not about the people around you. It is about quietly, Leslie building something genuine. Stick with me here, because you and I need to watch this next part very closely. She gets home, and for the first time in forever, her body just breathes. Then, her phone buzzes. A text from a mutual friend, Vector, has been asking about her while showing off his new girlfriend. The bad guy feels his grip slipping, so he pokes the cage to see if the bird still flinches. But Elena does not panic. She just stares at the screen, seeing the sad little trick for exactly what it is. The friend told Victor she was doing amazing, which is basically a dagger to a narcissist's fragile pride. Elena actually smiles. The life lesson here hits like a freight train. The greatest revenge you can get on someone who tried to destroy you is simply forgetting they exist and choosing to be happy. We are going to examine the exact moment a deeply broken heart starts beating on its own again. Elena types a quick text back to Adrian, telling him she is actually doing okay. Just a few words, but for her, it is a massive earthquake of progress. She stands by the window, staring at the local city, finally seeing the world without Victor's toxic filter. Sure, she has money in the bank, but she also has a terrifyingly empty calendar and a lot of healing left to do. She could still slip backwards. But for tonight, her life belongs to her alone. Here is a life lesson we all need to remember. Real freedom rarely looks like a dramatic movie ending with loud fireworks. Most of the time, freedom just feels like a quiet room where you can finally take a long, deep breath. For 3 weeks, Elena plays it incredibly smart. She sticks to her new routine with Adrian, slowly teaching her brain that she is safe. She even spends her nights looking at sailboats online, but dreaming about things she used to love. But you know how these stories go. The villain never walks away quietly. It happens in the most boring place possible, a local grocery store. She is completely off guard when she hears his voice. Her heart drops into her stomach. Victor is standing just 3 feet away. He is not wearing his arrogant power suit. He is in a plain black sweater, looking exhausted and deflated. He is poking at her fences, searching for a weak spot, buzzing. The lesson here is simple and cruel. Your past always chooses the absolute worst, most quiet time to tap you on the shoulder. Look at how hard she fights to keep her cool in this moment. Anyone else would be shaking, but Elena keeps her soul totally flat. She gives him a boring excuse about living nearby, handing him zero emotional reaction to feed his ego. The silence between them in that grocery aisle is heavy and toxic. When Victor says she looks lighter, the irony is sickening. Of course, she is lighter. She is no longer carrying his emotional baggage. Then he asks to grab a quick coffee bee. Inside her head, every single alarm bell is shrieking at her to drop her basket and run for the exit. Here is a hard life lesson we all learn, and eventually your gut instinct never lies. Your deepest survival radar always recognizes the wolf, even when he approaches you with sad eyes and a quiet, gentle voice. The scariest trick in a toxic person's life is pretend to be broken. It sneaks right past your logic and grabs your empathy. Elena sees him looking pathetic and, against her better judgment, gives him 10 minutes. They sit in a loud coffee shop, staring at each other like strangers. Victor immediately starts rewriting history. He brings up the money he gave her, acting like a generous hero who just wanted her to be safe. It is complete garbage, but this time Elena does not swallow the lie. She looks at him coldly and demands to know why he is actually sitting across from her. That brings us to a crucial life lesson. If you ever want to truly heal from a master manipulator, you must stop listening to their sad stories. You have to demand the cold, ugly truth. You and I have seen this exact script before, and it is maddening every time. Victor actually sits there and whines about how hard the breakup was for him. He destroys her life and then expects her to comfort. Finally, Elena feels the one emotion that can save her, pure, righteous anger. She cuts right through his pity party and lays out the brutal facts. He found a younger, weak girl to control, and he threw Elena in the trash. Simple as that, Victor immediately tries to spin his seat, making excuses to twist the story and confuse her. But Elena refuses to play along. The life lesson here is your ultimate shield. Toxic people survive by making things complicated and confusing. The best way to destroy their power is by forcing them to stand in the bright, unforgiving light of the truth. Watch his face closely right here. When a control freak loses power, their body physically glitches. Victor's jaw locks up. He starts rambling about how he just wanted to do the right thing, which is completely laughable. Elena sees right through the mask. He did not come here to apologize. He came here to use her as a bandage for his bleeding ego. He needs her quiet forgiveness to feel powerful again. Disgusted, Elena stands up to walk away. That is when the monster panics. Victor reaches out across the table begging for 5 more minutes. He promises to tell her the real truth. It is pathetic to watch. The lesson here is sharp and undeniable. The moment you finally enforce a hard boundary with a toxic person, their fake sadness will instantly turn into desperate, ugly panic. Elena sits back down, giving him enough rope to hang himself. You and I need to appreciate this justice. For the first time in his life, Victor actually looks uncomfortable. He spills the dark truth. His shiny new girlfriend, Irina, is already a massive disappointment. Barely 3 months in and the fake honeymoon is dead. He whines that she only cares about his money and refuses to worship him. Then he drops the hook. He looks Elena in the eye and whispers that he made a massive mistake leaving her. He expects her to melt, but the reality is glaringly obvious. This brings us to a life lesson that will save you years of heartache. When someone who threw you away comes crawling back, it is never out of true love. They only return because the new toy they left you for is already broken. You would think this is the big moment where Elena feels completely vindicated. The villain's is finally begging at her feet, but instead of a rush of victory, she just feels tired. That is how you know the spell is completely broken. She looks at him like a doctor diagnosing a neuromuscular disease. She tells him his mistake was not leaving her. His mistake was thinking a brand new girl that Jaina could magically fill the giant empty black hole inside his chest. He wanted a quick fix instead of doing the hard work of fixing himself. She coldly predicts his future. He will repeat the same toxic cycle forever. The life lesson here is absolute. You can change your city, your house, or your partner, but you will never truly escape your demons if you refuse to change the fundamental architecture of your own mind. Let's hit pause for a second, guys, and really look at what is happening here. Victor tries this pathetic denial, but the truth is written all over his face. Elena just stares at him. using this regulated, almost maternal tone that completely strips him of his power. The guy has absolutely zero internal identity, so he pulls out his ultimate manipulation card, swearing she is the only thing he truly wants.
6 weeks ago, would have broken her in half. She would have gone running right back into his cage. But now,
she just looks at him with this cold, clinical pity. Here is the fatal irony: he does not actually want her. He wants the broken, isolated pet he spent 7 years programming. But that girl is dead. He is just hunting a ghost in an empty house. She flat out rejects the script he is trying to hand her, finally locking in her own freedom. Victor gets desperate, begging and claiming that people can change. So, she hits him with a brutal reality check. Show me the proof you have changed in the last 3 months. The dead silence that follows is his confession. He just swapped her out for another dependent victim. She slams the door shut on him, permanently this time. Now, watch her as she walks away. Her hands are shaking. Her heart is hammering against her ribs. Her whole body is in shock. But in her head, absolute crystal clarity. The bitter truth about toxic people is that waiting for them to give you closure is a trap. True closure is having the guts to walk away and never, ever look over your shoulder again. You have to appreciate the brutal poetry of this power shift. The former prisoner is already building her future, while the big bad boss is stuck playing reruns in his own head. Suddenly, her phone lights up. It is Adrian, asking her out for food. She says yes without even hesitating. They do this clumsy, awkward dance, but trying to figure out if it is actually a date or not. It is messy, but it is that beautiful friction of normal human connection. She realizes she is actually falling for him. Why? Because Adrian looks at her without a loaded gun behind his eyes. He actually listens. There is no looming threat that he will rip his affection away if she steps out of line. He sees the actual living, breathing woman, not just a mirror for his own twisted ego. Even with this sweet taste of normal life, her emotional armor is still bolted tight. Healing is not some magic switch you can just flip. As soon as she gets back to her safe house, she calls almost to port the breach. She tells him exactly what happened, that Victor is already bored of his shiny new toy and tried to crawl back. Marcus tests her, asking if she cracked. She promises she held the line. They break down exactly why Victor's new relationship is already crashing. His new girl, Irina, never went through the brutal years of conditioning needed to survive a criminal narcissist. Here is the tragic lesson of the day. You can build all the twisted fantasies you want, but they will always snap under the crushing, heavy weight of reality. Marcus does the math and gives her a grim warning. Victor's new setup will completely collapse in about 4 weeks, and he will come knocking again. Elena swears she will never let him back in, but Marcus knows how these control freaks operate, where when a guy like Victor loses his main source of power, his brain short circuits. He will use every dirty, aggressive trick in the book to drag back what he thinks is his rightful property. He tells her to brace for a massive storm of manipulation. Elena pictures Victor right now, sitting somewhere drowning in a toxic mix of bitter regret and massive entitlement. But instead of panicking, she just breathes in the chin-chin. Her core is solid steel now. Let the predator claw at the gates. These new walls are not coming down. Stick with me here, guys, because this right here is the turning point. Marcus promised Ast as her shield against any more ambushes. She hangs up the phone and just looks around her tiny, cramped apartment. The furniture, it's cheap, the space is tiny, and it is full of secondhand junk. But you know what? It is purely hers. For 7 miserable years, Every breath she took was controlled by a lunatic who dictated her entire reality. Now, she finally has a space that is completely uncontaminated. Cut to later that night, and she is actually out at dinner with Adrian. They are sitting in this loud, messy little restaurant, arguing about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. It is so basic, so incredibly boring. And after everything she has survived, boring is a flat-out miracle. You can literally watch the invisible chains snapping right in front of us. Arguing over pizza toppings with Adrian is giving her brain the exact reset it desperately needs. When people survive these absolute monsters, it is not the dramatic speeches that break the spell. It is the stupid, shared laughter over dinner, where the Stockholmstation finally needs a sots to crack. The heavy fog in her head is finally clearing. Notice how she brings up Victor now, the guy who used to be the terrifying apex predator of her universe, gets brushed off with a deadpan tone. "We are done," she says, casually sipping her wine like she is talking about the weather. It is a surgical strike. She just cut off the emotional blood supply he needs to survive. The game has officially changed. Look at how her entire posture has changed. She is stepping out of that exhausting, paranoid survival mode and actually tasting real peace. She might want to give all the credit to Adrian,
but let us be real, this victory is entirely hers. I spent years brainwashing her into believing she was completely shattered and useless, to keep her on a tight leash.
But Adrian steps in with something totally different. No mind games, no frantic late-night dramas, just a calm, steady presence. The most brilliant thing he did was not trying to play the hero. He never fix her, and that's the bitter truth about escaping hell, guys. You do not need someone riding in on a white horse to save you. You just need a genuinely safe place so you can finally save yourself. Let's pause and unpack this scene together, because the contrast is wild. The tension between her and Adrian is shifting into this warm, genuine connection, completely replacing the sick adrenaline spikes she used to mistake for love.
But then he crashes the party when his phone rings.
Adrian has to step away to deal with a family crisis, leaving Elena sitting alone, just watching the room. She looks at these regular people, couples eating, kids laughing, the incredibly boring rhythm of a normal Tuesday night. And she wants it so badly, her chest aches. When you have spent years surviving the absolute psychological warfare of a criminal mastermind, boredom is not a punishment. It is the ultimate luxury. It is the only sanctuary where a shattered soul can actually breathe. The realization hits her out of nowhere, not with that frantic, desperate energy of a trauma bond, but with perfect, quiet clarity. She genuinely wants Adrian. She wants a life with zero chaos. No secret agendas, no mafia hitman, no walking on eggshells trying to guess her partner's mood. When Adrian finally comes back to the table, he is completely wrecked because his dad just got rushed to the hospital. Now watch her reaction. With Victor, every emergency was a fake, manufactured disaster designed to isolate her and keep her terrified. But this is just real, messy human life. She does not freeze up. She does not panic. She just looks him in the eye and tells him to come with his family. It is an absolute masterclass in taking back control of your own mind. He gives her this simple kiss on the cheek, and it speaks volumes about how far she has come. She walks home alone in the dark, but for the first time in years, the quiet is not a punishment. It is just room to breathe. She actually feels a healthy urge to comfort Adrian, which is a massive leap from the terrified, forced loyalty her ex demanded every single day. She tries to figure out what they are. Just friends? Not a chance. Her racing pulse and the way she cannot stop smiling tell a completely different story. She is so ready to torch her dark history and finally start over, but the universe has a sick sense of humor. Just as she settles into that peace, the silence shatters. Her phone starts ringing. The ghost of her past is at the door, demanding to be let in. This right here is the desperate, pathetic extinction burst of a monster losing his grip. Victor feels her slipping right through his fingers, so he goes nuclear. 1 missed call, 2, 3. It is a psychological siege designed purely to exhaust her into giving up. When she finally cracks and answers the phone, he instantly starts barking orders, desperately trying to prove he is still the king. He even threatens to show up at her door and completely violate her new safe space. Elena ends up giving in, agreeing to meet him for 1 single hour at a public place. It is a massive, calculated risk. Honestly, it is the lingering poison of her Stockholm syndrome, that tragic, deeply buried lie that she can somehow tame the starving wolf by just tossing him one last piece of meat. Stay close on this one, guys, because this is where it gets incredibly tense. There is this dark, twisted curiosity in her head now. She actually wants to see the big boss stripped of his armor. She picks a dark, moody bar, the exact kind of place he used to use to intimidate people, and orders a whiskey just to steady her nerves. She feels like she is losing her mind, which makes total sense. She is willingly walking right back into the lion's den. Victor walks in, terrifyingly punctual, like he always is. He slides into the booth, orders his scotch, and just stares at her. But he hears the bushmaid, EU entrometrostos, my YouTube's, biscustos, use bill sosufsi. Electric fence right down the middle. You seem stronger, he says. Boom. He spots the threat to his ego within 3 seconds. Elena snaps back with a sharp reply, totally missing that terrified respect he expects her to have. Since bullying is not always working, he immediately pivots to his favorite weapon, fake vulnerability. He actually admits he was wrong. He casually throws his new girlfriend, Arena, straight under the bus without blinking an eye. He calls her nice, which is just toxic code for saying she does not feed his massive ego enough anymore. He looks Elena dead in the eye and claims he misses the challenge she gave him. But let us be brutally honest here, guys. He does not miss her soul. He does not miss her laugh. He just misses having a high-quality green stone to keep his own arrogant self-image perfectly sharp.
Let us pause right here.
And look at this masterpiece of manipulation.
Elena is staring him down, calling out, he demands a submissive shadow instead of a wife. Victor has counter move.
It is an absolute clinic in narcissism. He pitches a fresh start. Notice how he doesn't deny the betrayal that would be too obvious. Instead, he downgrades his calculated cruelty into mere mistakes, like he accidentally dropped a glass instead of burning their marriage to the ground, and rewriting the script in real time, guys. He wants her to believe that completely destroying her was just the prologue to his grand redemption arc. The lesson here is simple. Never let someone rebrand their intentional abuse as a clumsy accident just so they can play the reformed hero. Watch what he does next, because it is terrifyingly smart. He closes the gap and takes her hand. This isn't just romance. It's a tactical strike aimed right at the muscle memory of their trauma bond. He is offering the one thing he starved her of for years, a real equal partnership. But here is the beautiful part. Elena doesn't flinch. She looks this guy dead in the eye and hits him with a brutal truth. Guys like him don't magically heal. They just upgrade their camouflage. She knows if she takes that deal, she is signing up for her own erasure, slowly letting him drain her identity to fill his bottomless emotional black hole. She pulls her hand back, and you can practically feel the chains breaking. Remember, the right words mean nothing when they come from the wrong person. Let's look at this piece by Paisel, shall we? Watching Elena meticulously dissect his play is pure cinema. She lays it out with cold, forensic precision. The honeymoon phase, the inevitable boredom, the brutal devaluation, and tossing her aside like trash. She actually knows his operating system better than he does. When he starts whining about how unfair she's being, she takes his own cynical worldview and shoves it right down his throat. Then she stands up. That physical shift, that is her taking back the high ground. She drops the gavel with absolute finality. The vault is locked. The emotional supply he's been feeding on is cut off forever. Sometimes the most powerful thing you're gonna do is simply refuse to play the game anymore. Then he drops the heavy artillery. I love you. The bitter irony here, he actually looks completely lost, like a vampire whose favorite mirror suddenly shattered. But Elena sees right through the smoke and mirrors, that she realizes he doesn't love her. He's mourning a ghost. He misses that broken, highly compliant girl
From 7 years ago who bent over backward to keep him happy. But that woman is dead, and Victor is staring at a stranger.
who finally owns herself. Walking out of that dimly lit bar, she isn't just leaving a toxic relationship. She is walking out of the psychological cell he designed specifically for her. Listen, here is a hard truth you have to swallow. Always true freedom always requires burying the version of yourself that your captor fell in love with. He calls Hernetum, hoping that old, familiar sound will pull her back, but her momentum is locked in. It isn't until she gets to her car, slamming that door and creating a physical airlock between them, that the dam finally breaks. She just sobs. But pay attention, because these tears are not for him. Not even close. She is grieving the innocent version of herself she had to sacrifice just to survive his ego. She's mourning the naive kid, while honoring the battle-scarred survivor sitting in the driver's seat. And right then, her phone, a text from Adrian. No drama, no mind games, just a simple, factual care. A total lifeline back to earth. Growth often feels a lot like grief, but letting yourself feel it is how you finally move on. You and I are going to unpack this next move together, because it shows exactly how much she's changed. She texts Adrian back, but keeps it steady, just a coffee date in broad daylight. Safe. Normal. As she drives, she runs Victor 2's little performance back in her head. A few months ago, that toxic gravity would have pulled her right back in. She would have swallowed the lie that he was a changed man. But her brain is completely rewired now. She finally grasps the cold reality that love, without baseline respect, is just manipulation wearing a cheap mask. She learned the hardest survival lesson of all. A predator only realizes how much they value the prey when the trap is empty. He can reach for her all he wants, but she is already existing in a world he can't touch. Here is where the psychology gets dangerously complicated. Elena desperately needs a safe harbor, someone like Adrian who offers steady warmth without the constant threat of pulling the rug out. But the thought of that stability kicks her nervous system into overdrive. After surviving a trauma bond, jumping into a new connection feels like stepping on a landmine, yet she doesn't panic. She sees this not as a reckless freefall, but a controlled descent. Back in her apartment, she brews some tea, stands by the cold glass looking over the city lights, and quietly buries the fake versions of herself she used to be. It's a quiet but heavy realization to actually survive, shed psychological skins that no longer keep us warm. Stick with me here, because her character arc is a masterclass in survival. We started with this naive 27-year-old who fell into for Victor's trap. Then she became the ghost of a wife, erasing her own needs just to keep the peace. Then came the trembling hands signing the divorce papers. This new version of Elena, she is messy, volatile, and totally unmoored, but she is finally real. She is taking up space instead of shrinking to fit a narcissist's demands. Suddenly, her phone buzzes. Victor is testing the Felgusser, probing for a weak spot. She swipes it away. He tries this 3 more times before she drops the hammer and permanently blocks his number. And tomorrow, she'll bring all this chaos straight to Adrian. The lesson? Your boundaries mean nothing until you enforce them. If she can just get her heart rate under control, she's planning to drop a massive confession on Adrian. The scary truth is, she is starting to lean on him, swinging wildly between total panic and this terrifying, irrational hope. But she decides to leave tomorrow's problems for tonight. Tonight, she just calls herself off right there by the window, letting the heat of her mug soak into her hands, forcing herself to stay in the present tense. It is like watching someone who just cut off a poisoned arm trying to learn how to balance again. This is the bitter truth they don't show. In the fairy tales, healing isn't some beautiful, graceful process. It is a brutal, exhausting reconstruction project. Outside, the rain finally starts hammering the glass, washing the slate clean. By morning, her sleep cycle is entirely trashed. Her brain has been spinning all night, rehearsing exactly how to tell Adrian about Victor's ambush and how she finally killed her old conditioning. She walks into the coffee shop, a perfectly neutral zone, mostly empty, a quiet shelter from the pouring rain. Adrian is already there, 2 steaming cups waiting, his hair still damp from the storm. He doesn't even need her to speak. He reads the sheer exhaustion on her face instantly. The sleepless night is basically carved into her posture. She immediately wraps her freezing hands around the ceramic mug, using the intense heat to first shock her nervous system back into reality. Sometimes, the smallest physical comforts are what it keeps us from completely shattering. She doesn't waste time. She drops the bomb that the moment Adrian left her, Victor swooped in, demanding an audience. Adrian keeps his face carved from stone, but his eyes betray a massive spike of adrenaline. Against all common sense, she admits she sat down with the monster. She takes a shaky breath, explaining how Victor spun a pathetic tale of regret, demanding his favorite toy back. But her refusal was absolute rock. She finally cut the last wire of her trauma bond. The fallout was ugly, ending with her permanently blocking him. She stares Adrian down, needing him to see this is permanent. The takeaway is brutal but true. Cutting off toxic people always causes an explosion before it brings you peace. Watch carefully how this plays out. She finally says it out loud. That chapter of her life is dead. Adrian gives a simple nod. Honestly, his quiet reaction kind of frustrates her. He leans back, keeping his body language totally non-threatening, and quietly admits he was terrified, but he respects her choices. He knows that real agency is the only cure for years of psychological control. But she pushes harder. She needs him to understand she didn't just run away from the darkness. She actively chose to walk toward the light, toward him. Adrian absolutely freezes in his chair. She holds up a hand, stopping him from saying a word.
The real lesson here, true independence means choosing who gets to stay in your life, not just running from who hurt you.
Think about the irony here. Adrian gave her exactly what Victor never could, support with 0 strings attached. He listened to her darkest trauma dumps, helping her brain remember how to feel joy again. In that safe bubble, something real started to grow. But Adrian gently suggests she might just be confusing survival via gratitude with actual romantic love. Big, big mistake. Her defenses flare up instantly. She flat out refuses to let another man tell her what she is feeling. She knows the difference between thanking someone for a life jacket and wanting them in the boat. The lesson here? The biggest risk you can ever take is trusting yourself to love again without a safety net. Come with me for this final scene where everything shifts. She reaches across the table and takes his hand. She wants to see where this goes. Adrian stares at their fingers, terrified that crossing this line will ruin the one safe dynamic she has left. Honestly, she is just as terrified. The divorce papers are barely dry, and the odds of a rebound surviving are terrible. But here is the brilliant twist. She points out that taking this leap might be exactly the medicine they both need to move forward. Adrian sits in the heavy silence, turning it over in his mind. Then his grip tightens. He confesses he's been waiting for her since the day they met. The lesson? You can never truly start a new chapter until you are willing to completely burn the old book. Let us pause and look at this masterpiece of human fragility. She finally dismantles that invisible wall he was holding up, and his face melts into a genuine, exhausted relief. That exact expression has become her ultimate anchor. They silently agree that breaking the rules like this is playing with fire. So they slow the timeline down. No big promises. Just two people breathing together while the rain streaks the cafe window and her fried nervous system finally stops. She is not certain of anything because her last captor killed her ability to trust, but she finally has her own choices. His phone buzzes, shattering the moment. He has to run, but they lock in a late-night meetup. The lesson here is simple, true safety is not about having all the answers. It is simply having the freedom to make your own choices. He slowly gets up, but hesitates long enough to drop a heavy truth bomb. He looks her dead in the eyes and calls her brave. Naturally, she shoots that down instantly, claiming she is just blindly thrashing around trying to survive. But he hits her with a profound point. Real bravery never actually feels heroic to the person living it. It just feels like sheer panic. He presses a soft kiss to her forehead and walks out. Watching him go, she realizes the suffocating weight on her chest is finally lifting. Sure, her path forward is an absolute mess, but it belongs exclusively to her. Suddenly, her burner phone lights up. It is Marcus, ringing the alarm. That narcissistic mob boss is actively hunting for her new location. She stares at the warning, takes a breath, and instantly deploys her digital traps. A harsh reminder that your past will always test your new boundaries. Marcus wraps up the warning and asks if she is holding up okay. And here is the kicker. For the very first time in years, when she says yes, she is not just lying to survive a trauma response. It is the absolute truth. She walks out the hatchery and steps right into the freezing downpour without an umbrella. The rain soaks right through her coat, plastering her hair against her cheeks. For her, this violent sensory shock is pure electricity. It wakes up a piece of her soul she thought was dead. She is unanchored, yet completely aligned with who she really is. The rest of the afternoon is a relentless blur of survival logistics. She drains the shadow accounts, funneling the cash into untraceable assets. The lessons is undeniable. Financial independence is classic, the unbreakable foundation of true personal freedom. You and I have to appreciate the tragic irony of her real estate hunt. She is actively searching for apartments that look nothing like the lavish, suffocating penthouses her former captor used to lock her in. She even buys books on sailing, proving she is finally looking toward a future instead of surviving the day. As the sun sets, She gets that flutter of anxiety, but the good kind. She climbs the stairs to his apartment in the arts district. The walls are plastered with his photography, raw, unfiltered slices of ugly, beautiful life. He desperately apologizes for the mess, but he completely misses the point. To a woman escaping a hyper-controlled sterile prison run by a mob boss, this messy, organic chaos is exactly what her soul needs to heal. They fall into a rhythm, making dinner together. The broken, chaotic spaces are the only ones where we can finally exhale. They crack open some ridiculously cheap booze, silently agreeing to dodge the heavy emotional baggage they unpacked earlier. Some atmospheric music hums in the background, keeping his mind moving. Now, watch what she does. She asks the big question about his photography. Why this specific obsession? He pushes his pasta around his plate, searching for the exact words. He admits he has a borderline sickness for freezing moments in time, because human life is brutally fragile. People just vanish. His camera is his weapon to rip a single second out of time and prove that someone actually existed. It is a desperate grasp for empirical proof of life, because when you hold the absolute truth in your hands, strip the monsters of their power to rewrite your history. The lesson here is loud and clear. Never let anyone else hold the pen when your life story is being written. The camera flips, and now he is digging into her old scars. He asks what she actually wanted out of life before the trauma swallowed her. The irony, she wanted to be a prosecutor. She wanted to lock up the exact type of monsters she ended up dating. Then Victor walked in, and she fell for the fatal illusion that the pure good fit fix ardent psychopath. She sits there, tearing her past self apart, calling herself an absolute idiot, but he stops her cold. He refuses to let her do that, gently relabeling her supposed stupidity as misplaced optimism. She is devastated, crying over the years of potential she threw away for a man who just used her for parts. But he pushes back harder. He forces her to look at the wreckage and find the hidden strength she built while surviving it. Pain is rarely wasted if you force it to teach you a valuable lesson. Let us open this case file together, you and I. We are watching the agonizing crawl of a real recovery phase after severe mental torture. Figuring out what you do not want in life usually costs you a massive chunk of your soul. Elena finishes her food and curls up on his beaten-up couch, and for the first time, her shoulders drop. This dingy little room has zero trace of the psychological landmines Victor used to plant in those luxury suites. Adrian politely asks if he can show her something. He pulls out a dusty, physical photo album, none of that curated digital fake reality, just raw history. He sits down next to her, close enough to prove he is safe, but far enough to avoid triggering her flight response. He flips the heavy pages right to the era of his failed engagement. The lesson? True intimacy always requires stepping into the blast radius of someone else's past. The photos are a brutal reality check. There is Adrian with a blonde named Katie, laughing over melting ice cream, completely infected with that naive, bulletproof optimism you only get when you are young. They look so incredibly sure that they are going to make it. Elena looks at him, totally confused, and asks why on earth he would show her the ghost of his dead relationship. His answer is an absolute masterclass in handling baggage. He casually explains that the final year was a bloody psychological war zone. But here is the heartbreaking twist. He refuses to let the bitter ending poison the memory of the days they were actually happy. He points to a faded shot of them smiling in at sunset, but perfectly separating the love he felt back then from the disaster it eventually became. It is a powerful reminder that a sad ending does not erase the truth of a beautiful beginning. Adrian drops a perspective shift that completely breaks her brain. He tells her that just because a relationship burns down, it does not mean it was a mistake. He suggests that those agonizing years with Victor, the narcissist who stole her 20s, actually served a massive purpose. Maybe she desperately needed that nightmare to forge her own unbreakable spine. And maybe Victor was just a parasite who needed her endless empathy to wear a human mask. That strikes such a nerve. She lets out a sudden, breathless laugh of pure release. Adrian holds eye contact, his face entirely free of judgment, and tells her that outgrowing people is just a painful biological fact. The spectacular failures in our lives always hand us way better survival data than the easy wins of the lessons. Staring us right in the face. Your worst chapters are usually your greatest teachers. You and I have seen this exact breaking point 100 times. When everything goes right, nobody asks why. But when your entire world collapses, you are forced to rip your soul apart and audit the pieces. Elena slides a fraction closer on the couch, her voice trembling as she thanks him for seeing the twisted she actually is. The steady rhythm of the rain creates a perfect, isolated, safe room. Finally, the dam breaks. She confesses she is absolutely terrified of feeling something real again. Terrified that her trauma is going to poison whatever this is. Adrian does the most crucial thing. He looks at her and then validates her sanity. He tells she is not broken, she is just healing. Then he flips the vulnerability back, admitting his own feared of just being her temporary rebound guy. Being brutally honest about your deepest fears is the only truly effective way to disarm them. He puts his biggest insecurity right on the table. The fear of being the safe, boring harbor after the storm, instead of the storm itself. But it cuts right through that logic with surgical precision. She points out that a meaningless rebound makes you want to hide. But sitting here with him, it is making her desperately want to take off the mask. She slowly reaches out and places her trembling hand over his. It is a massive leap. She is choosing beyond what was the compliant, hollow doll persona she had to invent just to survive Victor's daily psychological warfare. Adrian reads the room perfectly. He leans in at a glacial pace, leaving the door wide open for her to panic and run. She does not move a muscle. That first heavy hutch is like a sledgehammer tearing through years of fiercely guarded emotion numbness. True vulnerability is terrifying, but it is always the ultimate cure for deep trauma. Adrian slowly rests his directly against hers. It is a brilliant grounding technique, but it instantly tortures the polite lie that they were ever going to just be friends. As they pull closer into this deep, anchorless embrace, you can practically see the internal gears shifting inside Elena's head. She is not falling apart. She is finally unlocking a steel door in her mind that she welded Shadyel's years ago. The contrast here is utterly staggering. With Victor, everything was a terrifying game of chess, fueled by a toxic Stockholm syndrome. But this is two equals sitting in a dimly lit room, laying all their ugly cards on the table. They stay anchored to that sagging couch well past midnight, meticulously negotiating the terrifying mechanics of trusting another human being again. The quietest moments often require the most unbelievable acts of courage. Stick with me here, because this is the exact second the ghost of her trauma bond finally evaporates. They do not make any dramatic, lifelong promises. They just exist in this one fragile moment. When it is time to leave, Adrian walks her out into the freezing rain, and his lingering touch screams of a real protective panic. He demands she text him the second she crosses her threshold. As she walks, her inner monologue flips from dread to a wild, cautious hope. Earlier, she asked Shim how we could possibly this would not end in disaster. He smiled and admitted he had absolutely zero proof. He was simply choosing to believe in her. That is the fatal difference. Her loyalty to the narcissist was a hostage situation built on paralyzing fear. Her loyalty to Adrian is built on a blind, terrifying leap of faith. And genuine faith, guys, is the only thing that actually sets you free.
Let's hit pause on the story right here. You and I. For the first time, she is actually waking up because she wants to, not because she is terrified of what happens if she oversleeps.
Over those next few weeks, she starts doing the most boring, beautiful things. Drinking morning coffee, walking down the normal streets, feeling the wind on her face down by the water. She traded in Victor's suffocating, pitch-black billionaire penthouse is for a bright, tiny apartment where the sun actually hits her face. And the simple, meaningful life lesson here: real healing does not look like a montage of dramatic victories. It looks like the quiet, boring peace you finally allow your nervous system to feel. Meanwhile, Adrian is just hovering in the background like the ultimate green flag. No pressure, no dramatic speeches. He just snaps these candid photos of her existing, capturing the exact moments she forgets to wear her trauma mask. She calls him obsessed, but he knows he's just watching a ghost learn how to breathe again. Then, right at the 3-month mark, bam, the plot thickens. Her buddy Marcus calls with the kind of gossip that makes you sit down. Victor, the great and powerful narcissist, just blew up his entire life. His shiny new relationship crashed and burned in the most pathetic public way possible. Because here is the truth about people who treat you like an accessory. They always break their new toys too. This is the exact scene where you expect the female lead to smirk, right? Stick with me here, because her reaction is wild. Elena sits there, waiting for that familiar rush of petty vindication, or maybe a tragic pang of missing him. But nothing happens, just dead air. She looks at the wreckage of Victor's life, his sudden spiral into bad habits and desperate choices, and she just feels pity, the cold, distant kind of pity you feel for a stranger. Victor is desperately trying to reel her back in, but Elena just looks around her sunlit room and at Adrian's photos and tells Marcus to send one simple message. Tell him, I am fine, the lesson. True power is not getting the last word. True power is not caring what the other person has to say. 2 days later, guess who is standing on her sidewalk looking like a stray dog? Victor, the guy who used to own the skyline, is now pacing outside her building, a complete physical wreck. The arrogant king of the world has totally crashed. Elena watches him from her window when holding all the cards. She could just close the blinds. But old habits die hard, so she walks down to the street. He tries to play it cool, making some pathetic small talk about her new neighborhood. But the irony is thick enough to cut with a knife. She just stands there, arms crossed, totally closed off. Here is a simple truth for you to remember. When the illusion drops, the monsters that used to terrify you usually just look exhausted and incredibly sad. Watching Victor clear his throat and squirm in this scene is almost painful. He actually admits he is stuck in a loop. He keeps trading in his partners, but he is the broken record playing the same terrible song. He looks at her with these desperate, teary eyes and begs to become the perfect guy she always dreamed he could be. And Elena? She does not even blink. She completely shatters him with one sentence. She tells him that perfect guy never existed in the first place. He was just a fairy tale she invented to survive his abuse. If there is a life lesson to grab here, it is this. Wishing someone will change does not rewrite their DNA. And you cannot fall in love with potential when the reality is actively destroying you. Now Victor throws a Hail Mary. He asks if she is seeing someone else. She could lie to spare his fragile ego, but she decides to twist the knife with total honesty. She tells him yes.
But make sure he knows her happiness is strictly her own doing. The new guy is just a bonus. Victor's soul leave his body. He panics and offers her the world, the freedom, the space.
Everything he denied her for 7 long years. It is pathetic. She looks right through him and says, you had 84 months to figure this out. I am not hitting pause on my life, so you can finally learn how to treat a human being. The bitter truth is, an apology given only when someone is losing you is not an apology. It is just a hostage negotiation. Are you watching this? This is the grand finale of her old life. Victor pulls the ultimate desperate movie villain move and screams that he loves her, and Elena just drops the coldest, most factual truth bomb of the entire film. She tells him that love without basic respect is just annoying background noise. He never loved her. He just loved having a shiny mirror that made him look tall. She walks away, leaving him with the cruelest hope imaginable, that maybe one day he will find a broken girl who can survive his emotional black hole without completely vanishing. You and I need to remember this life lesson. True peace means finally walking away from the chaos that feels like home and choosing quiet that feels like a stranger. Let us freeze frame on the exact second a trauma bond snaps. It is wild to watch. Elena literally turns her back on the guy who used to dictate whether she breathed or suffocated. When he plays the victim and asks if the new goose was well, she casually mentions that Adrian actually sees her as a real person. Victor tries to leave her with a guilt trip,
playing the tragic hero, wishing her the best. But when she goes back upstairs and watches his expensive car disappear down the street, the tears never come. There is no dramatic breakdown.
The magic spell is completely broken, leaving behind nothing but a massive wave of relief. The life lesson here is harsh but real. Closure is not a crying hug. Closure is just forgetting to miss them. As if the universe is writing the script, her phone buzzes the second Victor is gone. It is Adrian. No drama, no games, just perfect timing. He offers to come over and cook dinner. It is such a jarring contrast to the absolute warfare she used to survive with Victor. Fast forward to her standing in her tiny kitchen, chopping vegetables and actually humming. Her apartment is filled with mismatched, cheap furniture, but it is entirely hers. When Adrian walks through the door an hour later, nobody is trying to win a power struggle. It is just two people happy to share the same oxygen. We should all write this life lesson down. True safety is never found in the massive cinematic gestures. It is hiding out in the quiet, boring, everyday moments. I love this detail. He brings her daisies. Just a $5 bunch of grocery store daisies. Victor used to bury her in these giant, suffocating rose arrangements just to prove how much money he had. But Adrian's daisies are just simple and light, and sitting at her tiny, wobbly table, their knees bumping under the wood, Adrian pitches an idea. He wants her to be the face of his new photography exhibit about human reinvention. He sees her as this brilliant survivor who crawled out of a predator's shadow. Elena actually hesitates, wondering if she is even interesting enough for a camera. Here is a life lesson that hits right in the chest. Sometimes we are so blind to our own survival that we need someone else to hold up a mirror and show us the scars.
Adrian looks at her from across that cheap little table and tells her she is the most fascinating human being he has ever met. Now for someone recovering from an absolute emotional vampire.
Letting someone take a magnifying glass to your soul is terrifying. Her instinct is to hide. But she takes a deep breath and says yes. And as the wine goes down, her walls just crumble. She starts talking about things she buried years ago, her old dreams, the childhood she forgot, the person she used to be before she became a billionaire's accessory. She finally
Wants to be the main character in her own story again. The profound life lesson here. Your real healing in the exact second you decide your existence is actually worth talking about.
Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we?
Elena suddenly has all the money and time in the world. She could move to Shiro, start a business, do literally anything. And honestly,
Absolute freedom is terrifying when you have spent years in a cage. But Adrian just holds her hand and tells her to take it 1 inch at a time. No giant leaps, just tiny steps. Later that night, they move to the couch and she just rests her head on his shoulder. Her heart is not racing. She is not terrified of saying the wrong thing. In that perfect, boring quiet, she looks up and tells him she is falling in love. Not a desperate, trauma-bonded panic, but real, boring, beautiful love. The lesson: you can only grow something real in a space that feels safe. You can literally see her brace for impact. She expects him to pull away or make a joke, because that is what she is used to. But Adrian just smiles and casually admits he has been in love with her for months. He actually traces it back to the night she completely lost her mind and threw a wine glass at a window. To him, that angry, messy moment meant she was finally breaking out of her fake, perfect shell. He kept his mouth shut all this time because he did not want to derail her recovery with his own feelings. Think about how rare that is compared to Victor's suffocating love bombing. She kisses him, and you can feel the absolute certainty in the room. The life lesson? Someone who actually loves you will protect your healing, even from themselves. Listen up, because this is where the movie usually feeds us that fairy tale garbage, but these two, they skip the grand, tearful promises. No contracts signed in blood. Just a quiet deal to wake up every day and not be terrible to each other. Fast forward 6 months, and I want you to look at Elena right now.
Standing on this little sailboat she bought herself, where Adrian, the city skylines and fade out. Adrian is right there, cockpit, clicking away his camera.
He tells her she looks happy, and she just nods. No fake smiles. No performing like a trained seal for her psycho ex. The irony here is beautiful, guys. She had to sail into completely unknown waters just to finally drop the anchor on her own soul. Sometimes, the only way to build life that actually belongs to you is to drift entirely off the map. So what does she do with all that leftover trauma? She weaponizes it. Elena walks into a dingy legal aid clinic and starts using every single psychological trick she learned from her megalomaniac ex to pull other victims out of the fire. She knows exactly how the monster thief thinks because she used to live in his cage. Meanwhile, Adrian finishes in his Foso series. And the craziest part? The pictures are just her, cooking, standing there, breathing. She isn't scanning the exits or waiting for a bomb to drop. She is just existing inside her own skin, and it is a complete revelation. This is the part that always gets me right in the chest. The exact same wounds that almost destroyed her. The very things she's using to keep other people alive. Your deepest scars usually end up being the sharpest tools in your arsenal. Let us pause the tape right here. Look at this moment together. She is staring at these portraits, telling Adrian he's somehow made her look brave, and he just gently shoots that down. He tells her the bravery was always in the room. He just pointed a lens at it. Right then, her phone buzzes. It is a text from Marcus. Guess what? Victor found himself a shiny new victim from his little billionaire country club. You would expect her to shatter, right? Scream, cry, maybe throw the phone into the ocean. But she just goes completely blank. Not a single spark of jealousy. No urge to warn the new girl. No revenge fantasies. Just a heavy, empty shrug. Guys, the bitterest pill for a control freak like Victor isn't hatred. It is the day his ultimate obsession forgets he even exists. True freedom is absolute, cold indifference. She literally types out a polite well-wish, hits send, and shoves the phone in her pocket. Look at the dynamic playing out on this boat right now. This is what actual safety looks like. They are two complete, independent humans choosing to float next to each other. Instead of two broken halves trying to eat each other alive just to feel full. She asks to stay out on the water a little longer, watching the sun drag those heavy orange colors across the sky. Heading back to the docks, she looks back at the ghost of that 27-year-old girl she used to be, the crying woman who signed those divorce papers. The brutal irony of life is that growing up feels exactly like dying. You have to ruthlessly burn down the person you used to be, just so the person you are actually meant to become has enough room to breathe.
Really think about the irony here. Always look at marriage and call it a total failure. But honestly, that absolute nightmare of a human being
actually did her the biggest favor of her lie. He completely torched the weak, naive version of Elena that was dumb enough to fall for his trap in the first place. He destroyed her so badly that she had to upgrade her entire operating system. Later on, we see them in the kitchen. She is reading case files, he is chopping vegetables. Nobody is begging for attention, but then the universe throws a wrench in the gears.
Adrian drops the bomb that he got a massive gallery show in New York. Because just when you think you have finally built a quiet life,
fate shows up to test if the bricks are actually cemented or if they are just painted on. You can literally see the panic flash in Adrian's eyes. He is terrified that packing his bags for a few weeks is going to shatter this fragile piece they have built. But Elena does not even let him finish his sentence. She looks Zed dead in the eye and tells him to pack his bags. In her old life, anyone walking out the front door was a threat, a punishment. But here, she is practically pushing him onto the plane. She tells him that having their own separate lives is exactly what makes their relationship work. You can actually see the physical weight fall right off his shoulders. She even casually mentions she might fly out to watch him shine. It is a sharp little truth, guys. A real partner wants to watch you conquer the world, while a warden is terrified you might realize that there is a world outside their walls. Look closely at this beat, because this is the exact moment she finally breaks the curse. Elena realizes that if Victor were in this room, he would have already sabotaged the gallery show just to keep her small. Victor saw any success he did not control as a personal insult. But Adrian just wants her to be great without trying to own her greatness. Lying in bed that night, listening to him breathe in the dark, she thinks about the future. And for the first time in years, her chest does not tighten up. The panic is completely gone.
She finally understands the bitterest joke of all. You can never go build a safe house on someone else's property because they can always change the locks.
You have to lay down your own bricks, pour your own concrete, and secure your own foundation before you ever let anyone else inside. Here is the hard truth we all have to swallow. Victor was the wrecking ball she desperately needed to realize her house was rotting. Adrian was the solid ground she rested on. But the actual heavy lifting, That was all Elena. She finally killed the lie that her trauma sold her. She does not need a man or a savior or anyone else to justify her breathing air. She is entirely whole on her own. Anybody else is just extra credit. Jump ahead 3 months, and she is standing in the middle of a packed New York gallery, staring at giant photographs of her own survival. Adrian walks up behind her, nervously asking what she thinks of the shot where she is laughing. And she just smiles. Because the ultimate victory against the person who probably tried to erase you is looking in the mirror and finally recognizing the face staring back. Picture this scene, because it hits incredibly hard. Elena is standing in this bright room, watching absolute strangers drink wine and pick apart her psychological scars. Adrian gets protective. He leans in and whispers that he can rip the photos off the wall right now if it is too much. But she does not let buy the pictures, because she wants the world to see the messy, uncomfortable evidence that getting destroyed is not the end of the script. She is leaving breadcrumbs for the next victim. The simple, brutal lesson here is that even when someone takes a sledgehammer to your entire reality and leaves you with absolutely nothing, you can still sweep up the dust, mix it with water, and build a brand new empire completely out of scratch. 0 is just a starting line. Now watch how she controls the narrative.
She actually turns to the crowd and starts talking. She tells them straight up that fixing a shattered mind is an ugly, crooked road.
You don't just wake up fixed. You bleed, you stumble. It is not a pre-process, but it is the only way out of the dark. Adrian is just beaming at her. He tells her she took something horrific and turned it into art. The show is a massive hit. Later that night, they are sitting at a rooftop bar high above the noise of the city, and the irony really sets in. Elena realizes that having her life violently torn apart was the only way she was ever going to wake up. We all love to wrap ourselves in a warm, comfortable lie, but the cold, jagged truth is the only thing that can actually stitch a broken heart back together and make it beat again. You and I have probably both made this exact same mistake. They are sitting there under the city lights, and suddenly Elena tenses up. Her damaged brain is so used to war that absolute peace feels like a trap. She looks at him and confesses that being happy is terrifying, because she is just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Adrian tries to play the hero, saying nothing bad will happen, but she immediately calls him out on that lie, so he pivots. He looks right at her and says, "Yeah, things will go wrong, but I will be right here when they do." And that is what finally breaks her walls down. The biggest lie movies sell us is that true love means you will never feel pain again. Real love is just having someone who absolutely refuses to leave the room when the walls inevitably start crashing down around you. The hardest part to accept is that fixing your not on some cinematic triumph. It is a boring, exhausting, daily choice to just not burn your own house down. Elena goes back to school. She works at the clinic. She sails a boat. She builds a fortress of friends that her husband cannot ever touch. Then, exactly 1 year after she ran for her life, her phone pings. It is an email from Victor's attorney. The divorce is officially finalized. That is it. No final showdown in the rain. No screaming match. A whole marriage, all that control, all that terror, completely erased by a couple of digital signatures on a PD. It is the most beautiful anticlimax in the world, because sometimes the absolute biggest flex you can pull on the universe is to just calmly shut the folder, turn your back, and never look behind you again. Let's hit pause for a second, because this is where the movie usually gives us a massive meltdown. But look at Elena. The divorce papers are signed, and she is just sitting in that same little cafe where she and Adrian first figured things out. He asks why she is so quiet, and she smiles this incredibly tired, beautiful smile. She tells him she finally feels free, like the anchor is cut. She is not carrying the ghost of her marriage anymore. She is just breathing in the present moment. We expect moving on to be this loud, cinematic triumph, but the truth is so much heavier. The simple life lesson here is that true closure is just a quiet, invisible moment where you realize the past cannot hurt you anymore. Watch this carefully, because it shatters every romantic cliche we have ever been sold. Elena sits across from the guy who anchored her through a hurricane, trying to apologize for being a total wreck. And Adrian does not give her some cheesy line about how she is flawless. He looks and is right back and says he would take her honest mess over a fake kind of perfect any day. They walk down the street together, fully aware that they will argue again, and it will be hard. But that is the fatal strike to our hearts, right? The real-life lesson you and I can take away from this is that authentic love is never about finding someone who has no baggage. It is simply about finding the person who makes the active choice to sit in the dirt with you while you unpack it. Think about what we just watched. For 7 years, Elena was not even a person. She was a human shield for Victor, a guy so hollow he had to consume her personality just to feel alive. When his grip finally slipped, she felt like she was dying, but she was waking up. Victor built an empire on making her feel tiny, while Adrian just gave her a quiet space to breathe without putting on a show. It is brutal to watch her mourn a man who destroyed her, but the harsh, beautiful life lesson here is that sometimes the worst betrayal you will ever face acts like a surgeon's blade. It slices away all the fake adaptations and trauma bonds, leaving absolutely nothing behind but your raw, unbreakable, and entirely authentic self. Pause the screen right here and just look at the way she carries herself. Elena is no longer that terrified hostage shrinking into the shadows to keep a monster calm.
She is walking down the exact same streets Victor used to control, but she the bitter Victor, he never actually had the power to destroy her.
He only exploited the doubts that were already there. Sure, watching her marriage burn was pure agony, but it forced her to dig down to solid rock instead of standing on the quicksand of his validation. The simple, vital life lesson we have to take from this is that knowing your absolute worth is the strongest armor you can ever wear against those who want to consume you. As the credits start to roll, the emotional payoff here is massive. Elena traded the chaotic panic of loving a narcissist for something incredibly rare, a partnership built on quiet, radical honesty. She is no longer a prop in Victor's twisted stage play. She is writing her own script now. She is actively choosing the unpredictable nature of real connection, completely rejecting the manufactured roller coaster she used to mistake for love.
If there is one simple life lesson you and I can walk away with today, it is this.
A truly authentic life is always going to be messy, uncertain, and far from perfect. But when you are finally stepping out of the dark, suffocating shadow of emotional captivity, that messy, honest reality is the only valid cure in the world.